The most powerful encounters happen when we least expect them. At 30,000 feet, a single mother's quiet grief becomes the stage for an extraordinary meeting that will change everything. A stranger's harassment, a mysterious man's intervention, and a storm that grounds more than just planes. This is the story of Anna Carter, whose darkest hour became the beginning of something beautiful. Stay with me until the end of this journey and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The fluorescent lights of Denver International Airport cast harsh shadows across Anna Carter's face as she clutched her boarding pass with trembling fingers. Gate B47, Flight 1947 to LaGuardia. The numbers blurred together through her exhaustion, but she forced herself to focus. Sophie was asleep in her arms, 6 years old, and blissfully unaware that they'd just buried Grandma Ruth 3 hours ago. Anna's throat tightened as she remembered her mother's final words. "You're stronger than you know, sweetheart. Don't let the world convince you otherwise." Easy for her to say Ruth had never raised a child alone, never faced the crushing weight of every decision falling on one pair of shoulders. The gate agent's voice crackled through the intercom. "Now boarding all passengers for Flight 1947 to New York LaGuardia. We'd like to begin with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." Anna glanced at her economy boarding pass, Group 4. She had 45 minutes until her section would be called 45 minutes to hold herself together in this sterile airport purgatory. Sophie stirred in her arms, her small face pressed against Anna's black dress. "Mommy, are we going home now?" Sophie's voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Yes, baby. We're going home." Anna smoothed her daughter's blonde curls so much like her own had been at that age, before life had worn the gold from them, leaving behind this mousy brown that seemed to match her perpetual state of barely hanging on. She found 2 empty seats near the gate and settled Sophie beside her. The little girl immediately curled up again, using Anna's lap as a pillow. Anna stared out the massive windows at the tarmac, where ground crews scurried around planes like ants. The late afternoon sun was already dipping behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that reminded her painfully of her mother's favorite lipstick. "Don't think about it," she told herself. "Not here. Not now." But grief had a way of ambushing her when she least expected it. In the shower that morning, Anna had reached for the hotel shampoo and suddenly remembered how her mother used to wash her hair when she was Sophie's age, gentle fingers working through tangles while humming old Broadway tunes. The memory had brought her to her knees on the cold tile floor, sobbing until no sound came out. "Mommy." Sophie's sleepy voice pulled her back to the present. "Why are you crying?" Anna quickly wiped her cheek, surprised to find it wet. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. It's been a long day." Sophie sat up and wrapped her small arms around Anna's neck. "It's okay to be sad about Grandma Ruth. She told me it was okay to cry when people we love go to heaven." The simple wisdom of children. Anna held her daughter tighter, breathing in the scent of the strawberry shampoo they'd used at the hotel. "When did Grandma tell you that?" "Yesterday, when you were talking to the funeral man. She said crying means we loved someone very much, and that's never wrong." Anna's chest constricted. Even in her final days, her mother had been taking care of everyone else, preparing Sophie for the goodbye. Anna couldn't bring herself to explain. Ruth Carter had been a force of nature, a teacher for 40 years, a widow who'd raised Anna alone after her father died in a car accident when she was 12. The parallels weren't lost on Anna, history repeating itself with cruel precision. "Group 2, you may now board." Anna watched the business-class passengers line up, most of them in expensive suits, tapping on phones or laptops. She wondered what it would be like to travel without constantly calculating the cost, without choosing between a decent meal and new shoes for Sophie. Her teacher's salary stretched thin most months, especially after Marcus had stopped sending child support 6 months ago. He'd moved to Seattle with his new girlfriend and seemed to think geography absolved him of responsibility. "I need to use the bathroom," Sophie announced, bouncing on her toes in that way kids did when they'd waited too long to mention it. Anna gathered their carry-on bag and led Sophie through the maze of travelers to the restroom. The fluorescent lights inside were even harsher than making Anna's reflection in the mirror look like a ghost. Her green eyes were rimmed with red, and her skin had that translucent quality that came with exhaustion and grief. She looked exactly like what she was, a 32-year-old woman trying to hold herself together with sheer willpower. While Sophie was in the stall, Anna splashed cold water on her face and tried to summon some semblance of composure. 2 hours to New York. She could manage 2 hours. Then home to her small apartment in Queens, where she could finally break down properly. They returned to the gate just as Group 3 was being called. Anna's heart rate picked up. Almost time. She gathered their things and positioned herself in line behind a businessman who reeked of cologne and a young couple who couldn't stop touching each other, the casual intimacy of their connection. His hand on the small of her back, her fingers intertwined with his, sent a pang through Anna's chest. When was the last time someone had touched her like that? Marcus probably back when things were still good between them. Before Sophie's birth had revealed just how selfish he truly was. Before sleepless nights and mounting bills had turned love into resentment. "Group 4, please begin boarding." Anna took Sophie's hand and moved forward with the crowd. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at Sophie as she scanned their boarding passes. "Flying home?" she asked. "Yes," Anna managed. "Finally." The jet bridge felt endless, a tunnel between her old life and whatever came next. Sophie chattered beside her, excited about flying in an airplane, but Anna barely heard her. She was thinking about Monday morning, when she'd have to return to PS 47 in Astoria and face her third-grade class. How do you teach children about fractions and grammar when your own world has just fractured? The plane was smaller than she'd expected, a single aisle with 3 seats on each side. Their row was halfway back, 15A and 15B. Anna hoisted their bag into the overhead compartment, grateful she'd packed light. Everything else, her mother's belongings, the photo albums, the china that had belonged to Anna's grandmother, would be shipped later. She couldn't bear sorting through it all right now. Sophie claimed the window seat with delight, pressing her nose against the plastic and pointing out every vehicle on the tarmac. Anna sank into the middle seat and closed her eyes. The man in 15C hadn't boarded yet, which gave her a few minutes of relative peace. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard United Flight 1847 to New York LaGuardia. We're currently boarding all remaining passengers and expect to push back from the gate in about 15 minutes. Anna fumbled for her phone and sent a quick text to her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who was watching their cat boarding now. "Should be home by midnight. Thank you again for everything." Mrs. Chen had been a godsend these past few days, insisting on watching Whiskers and even bringing over casseroles that Anna had been too heartbroken to eat. 83 years old, and still taking care of everyone on the block. Another Ruth in the making. "Excuse me," a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Anna looked up to see a tall man in the aisle holding a black leather bag. He was probably in his early 40s with graying temples and the kind of bearing that suggested military background. His clothes were simple dark jeans and a navy button-down, but something about the way he carried himself commanded attention. "I'm in 15C," he said quietly, gesturing to the seat beside Anna. "Of course." Anna stood to let him pass, acutely aware of how disheveled she must look compared to his composed appearance. He settled into the aisle seat with economic movements, stowing his bag under the seat in front of him and immediately fastening his seatbelt. Sophie turned from the window. "Hi, I'm Sophie. This is my first time on an airplane. Are you excited?" The man's expression softened slightly. "Hello, Sophie. And yes, flying can be pretty exciting." His voice had a slight rasp to it, as if he'd spent years shouting over engines or wind. Anna noticed he wore no wedding ring, but there was a pale band of skin on his finger that suggested he had recently. "I'm sorry," Anna said, settling back into her seat. "She's enthusiastic." "No need to apologize." He extended his hand. "Daniel Cole. Anna Carter. And you've met Sophie." His handshake was firm, calloused. Definitely military, Anna decided. Or ex-military. There was something in his eyes, a wariness that she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror. The look of someone who'd been through something difficult and was still processing it. The plane filled steadily around them. A flight attendant demonstrated the safety procedures, while most passengers ignored her scrolling through phones or settling in for the flight. Anna helped Sophie with her seatbelt and tried to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. She'd never been a good flyer, and emotional exhaustion only made the anxiety worse. "Have you flown before?" Daniel asked Sophie, who was bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Nope, Mommy says we're going to be in the clouds. Do you think we'll see any birds up there?" "Probably not birds, but the view should be pretty spectacular once we get above the clouds." Anna was grateful for his patience with Sophie's questions. Most strangers barely tolerated children on planes, treating them like necessary evils to be endured. But Daniel seemed genuinely engaged, answering Sophie's rapid-fire questions about altitude and turbulence with the kind of detail that suggested real knowledge. "Are you a pilot?" Sophie asked, confirming Anna's suspicions. "I was a long time ago. Different kind of flying, though." "Military pilot, then." Anna wondered what had brought him to commercial aviation as a passenger. Retirement. Career change. She was curious, but didn't want to pry. Whatever his story was, it was none of her business. The engines whined to life, and Anna felt the familiar flutter of pre-flight anxiety. She gripped the armrests as the plane began to taxi, trying to focus on Sophie's excited commentary rather than the weight in her chest. "First time flying?" Daniel's voice was quiet, meant only for her. Anna nodded, not trusting herself to speak without revealing how close she was to falling apart. "It helps to breathe slowly," he said. "In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Old trick from flight training." She followed his guidance, surprised to feel her heart rate slow slightly. "Thank you." The plane turned onto the runway, engines building to a roar. Sophie pressed her face to the window, delighted by the speed and motion. Anna closed her eyes and tried to channel her daughter's excitement instead of her own dread. And then they were airborne, Denver falling away below them in a grid of lights. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and for a moment Anna felt something other than grief. Wonder, maybe, or hope. Her mother had always loved sunsets. "Look, Mommy," Sophie pointed out the window. "The mountains look like sleeping giants." Anna leaned across to look, her shoulder brushing against Daniel's. The Rockies stretched endlessly to the west, their peaks touched with snow even in late September. It was beautiful in a way that made her throat tight with emotion. "Your mother would have loved this view," she whispered to Sophie, not meaning for Daniel to hear. But he did. "Recent loss?" Anna nodded, not looking away from the window. 3 days ago. Cancer. I'm sorry." There was something in his voice that suggested he understood that kind of loss intimately. Anna risked a glance at him and saw her own grief reflected in his dark eyes. The plane leveled off, and the flight attendants began their drink service. Anna ordered ginger ale for Sophie and coffee for herself, hoping the caffeine would help her stay alert for the drive home from LaGuardia. Daniel requested water, no ice. "Are you from New York?" Anna asked, making small talk to distract herself from the constant ache in her chest. "Not originally. Born and raised in Queens, never lived anywhere else." She realized how provincial that sounded. "I always meant to travel more, but life gets in the way." Something like that. Sophie had fallen asleep against the window, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past few days. Anna adjusted the airplane blanket around her daughter's shoulders and tried to settle in for the long flight ahead. That's when she heard the voice behind her. "Can't believe they let just anybody have kids these days." Anna's blood went cold. The comment was quiet, meant to be overheard, but not directly confronted. She turned slightly and saw a man in his 50s, expensively dressed, with the soft look of someone who'd never faced real hardship. He was traveling with another man of similar age, both of them already several drinks in, despite the flight being less than an hour old. "Look at her." The first man continued, his voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty that some people wore like armor. Probably another welfare queen dragging her kid across the country on taxpayer dime. Anna's face burned. She wanted to turn around and defend herself, to explain that she was a teacher, that she paid her own way, that she'd just buried her mother and was doing her best to hold her family together. But experience had taught her that engaging would only make it worse. Instead, she focused on Sophie's sleeping face and tried to breathe through the humiliation. Just 2 more hours. She could endure anything for 2 hours. "I bet the father's not even in the picture," the second man chimed in. "These single mothers having kids they can't afford." Anna's hands clenched in her lap. The comment hit especially deep because it wasn't entirely wrong. Marcus had abandoned them, and money was always tight. But that didn't give strangers the right to judge her, to make assumptions about her life based on nothing but their own prejudices. Probably on food stamps, too. My tax dollars feeding her mistakes. That's when Daniel moved. Anna felt him shift in the seat beside her, a subtle change in posture that somehow altered the entire atmosphere around them. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Gentlemen." The word wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. The conversation behind them stopped abruptly. Daniel stood smoothly, turning to face the men with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of years of training. Anna couldn't see his expression, but she heard the sharp intake of breath from the seat behind her. "I couldn't help but overhear your commentary," Daniel said, his voice still conversational, but with an edge that made Anna's skin prickle. "I'm wondering if you'd care to repeat it loud enough for the entire cabin to hear." Silence. No strange. "You seemed so confident in your observations a moment ago." Anna twisted in her seat to look back. The 2 men had gone pale, suddenly very interested in their drinks. The one who'd been doing most of the talking was sweating, despite the cabin's cool temperature. "I don't think you understand who you're talking to," one of them managed weakly. Daniel's smile was sharp as a blade. "Actually, I think it's you who doesn't understand. See, I've spent the better part of 20 years in dealing with bullies who think their money, or their mouth, gives them the right to torment people who can't fight back." He leaned forward slightly, and Anna saw the man actually flinch. "The difference is most of the bullies I've dealt with were armed and trying to kill me. You're just drunk and pathetic." The flight attendant appeared at Daniel's elbow, drawn by the tension in the cabin. Is everything all right here? She asked. Just clearing up a misunderstanding? Daniel said, not taking his eyes off the men. These gentlemen were just apologizing for their inappropriate comments about the lady and her daughter. The first man looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Daniel's expression changed his mind. Sorry, he mumbled. I'm sorry, what was that? I don't think she heard you. We're sorry, the second man said, more clearly looking directly at Anna for the first time. We were out of line. Anna nodded stiffly, her heart hammering in her chest. Part of her was mortified to be the center of attention, but a larger part was amazed. When was the last time someone had stood up for her like that? Daniel remained standing until the men had turned away and started talking in hushed tones about something else entirely. Only then did he settle back into his seat, his movements as controlled as they'd been threatening moments before. You didn't have to do that, Anna said quietly. Yeah, I did. There was something final in his tone that discouraged argument. Anna studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands rested carefully on his knees. This wasn't the first time he'd confronted bullies, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Thank you, she said simply. He nodded once, then returned to looking out the window. The sun had fully set now, leaving them flying through darkness, punctuated by the occasional lights of towns far below. Sophie stirred beside her, mumbling something in her sleep about Grandma's cookies. Anna smoothed her daughter's hair and tried to process what had just happened. In the space of 5 minutes, Daniel Cole had gone from polite stranger to fierce protector, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. The flight attendant returned with a cup of coffee for Anna and fresh water for Daniel. Everything settled back there? She asked quietly. Should be, Daniel replied. She nodded and moved on, but Anna noticed her keeping a closer eye on their section for the rest of the flight. Can I ask you something? Anna said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. Sure. What did you mean about dealing with bullies for 20 years? Daniel was quiet for so long, she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories he'd rather forget. Air Force. Started flying when I was 22. Spent most of my career in places where people with guns thought they could intimidate anyone weaker than themselves. How long ago did you get out? 6 months. The rawness in his voice told her it hadn't been his choice. Medical discharge. Personal tragedy. Anna wanted to ask, but recognized the signs of someone who wasn't ready to talk about their wounds. She knew the feeling intimately. They fell into silence again, the steady hum of the engines creating a cocoon around their little row. Anna found herself studying Daniel when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something about him that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Not the desperate attraction she'd felt for Marcus, all flash and excitement, that had burned out as quickly as it ignited. This was different. Steadier. Don't, she warned herself. Don't read anything into this. He was just being decent. That doesn't mean anything. But her treacherous heart was already wondering what it would be like to have someone like Daniel in her corner permanently. Someone who would stand up to bullies and speak with quiet authority and make her feel like she wasn't facing the world alone. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, interrupting her dangerous thoughts. Folks, this is Captain Martinez with an update on our flight. We're currently about 90 minutes out from LaGuardia, but I'm afraid I have some bad news. There's a major storm system moving through the New York area, and air traffic control has put us in a holding pattern. We're going to circle for a while and see if conditions improve. Anna's stomach dropped. She needed to get home. Mrs. Chen was expecting her, and Sophie had school in the morning, and she couldn't handle any more delays or complications. Not today. Additionally, the captain continued, the storm is pretty severe with heavy rain and wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. If conditions don't improve in the next hour, we may need to divert to our alternate airport. Where would that be? Anna asked Daniel, panic creeping into her voice. Could be anywhere. Philadelphia maybe, or Hartford. Depends on where the weather's clearer. The plane banked left, beginning what Anna assumed was their first circle in the holding pattern. She looked out the window and saw nothing but darkness and the occasional flash of lightning in the distance. Mommy? Sophie was awake now, rubbing her eyes. Why is the plane turning? Just a little delay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. But Sophie was fully alert now, picking up on Anna's anxiety with the supernatural ability of children to sense when adults were worried. Are we going to crash? No, baby. Planes are very safe. The pilot is just waiting for better weather. Anna hoped her voice sounded more confident than she felt. Flying had always made her nervous, and the added stress of grief and exhaustion was making it worse. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her water cup. Daniel noticed. Hey, he said quietly, leaning closer so Sophie couldn't hear. This is routine. Happens all the time. These pilots know what they're doing. I know. I can't handle much more today. The admission slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than she'd intended. But instead of pulling away, Daniel's expression softened. Rough few days. Rough few years, honestly. Today was just the culmination. Lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating massive thunderheads that stretched as far as Anna could see. The plane bounced slightly in the turbulence and her grip on the armrest tightened. Tell me about her, Daniel said suddenly. Who? Your mother. What was she like? Anna blinked, surprised by the question. Why? Because thinking about someone you love is better than thinking about turbulence. It was such a simple kindness, but it nearly undid her. When was the last time someone had cared enough to distract her from her own anxiety? She was. Anna paused, searching for words that could capture 40 years of love and guidance. She was the strongest person I knew. Raised me alone after my dad died, worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, never complained. She taught 3rd grade for 40 years, and kids from her first classes still sent her Christmas cards. Sophie perked up at the mention of her grandmother. Grandma Ruth made the best chocolate chip cookies in the whole world. She did, Anna agreed, smiling despite the tears threatening to spill over. And she read to Sophie every night when she stayed with us. Voices and everything. She could make any story come alive. Sounds like Sophie got some good genes, Daniel observed. Anna looked at her daughter, who was now pressed against the window again, watching the lightning with fascination rather than fear. She's braver than I am. I doubt that. The plane shook again, and Anna's knuckles went white on the armrest. Without thinking, Daniel covered her hand with his palm warm and steady against her cold fingers. Breathe, he reminded her. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Anna followed his guidance, acutely aware of the calluses on his palm and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt anchored to something solid. Better. She nodded, not trusting her voice. His hand remained over hers, and she didn't pull away. The captain came back on the intercom. Folks, I've got another update for you. Unfortunately, the weather in New York isn't cooperating, and we're running low on fuel from all this circling. We're going to divert to Omaha, Nebraska, where conditions are much better. I know this is an inconvenience, but safety is our top priority. Anna's heart sank. Omaha, She'd never been to Nebraska, had no idea how she'd get home from there, and didn't have money for an unexpected hotel stay. United will put you up in hotels for the night and get you on the first available flight to New York tomorrow. The captain continued as if reading her mind. We should be on the ground in about 30 minutes. Sophie clapped her hands together. We get to stay in a hotel like a vacation. Anna forced a smile. Something like that, sweetheart. But inside she was calculating costs and logistics. Even if United paid for the hotel, she'd need meals and transportation. Money she didn't have, complications she couldn't handle right now. Daniel must have sensed her distress because he squeezed her hand gently. It'll work out, he said quietly. You don't know that. No, but I know you're stronger than you think. Your mother was right about that. Anna stared at him. I never told you she said that. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Lucky guess. The plane began its descent toward Omaha, leaving the storm behind. Through the window, Anna could see the lights of the city spread out like a constellation, foreign but welcoming. Maybe this wasn't the disaster she'd first imagined. Maybe it was just another challenge to survive like all the others. As they touched down with barely a bump, Anna realized she was still holding Daniel's hand. She should probably let go, maintain appropriate boundaries with this stranger who'd already seen too much of her vulnerability. Instead, she held on tighter. The terminal in Omaha was smaller than Denver's, but bustling with displaced passengers from multiple delayed flights. Anna gathered their belongings while Sophie bounced with renewed energy, excited by this unexpected adventure. United had set up a customer service desk near the gate, staffed with harried representatives trying to accommodate hundreds of stranded travelers. The line stretched halfway across the terminal. This is going to take forever, Anna murmured, surveying the crowd. Wait here, Daniel said. I'll handle this. Before Anna could protest, he was walking toward the desk with that same purposeful stride she'd noticed earlier. She watched in amazement as he bypassed the line, entirely approaching one of the representatives directly. There was a brief, quiet conversation she couldn't hear, and then the woman was typing rapidly on her computer. 5 minutes later, Daniel returned with hotel vouchers and meal tickets. How did you? Anna began. Airline status has its privileges. But Anna suspected it was more than that. Something about Daniel commanded respect, made people want to help him. She was beginning to understand that she'd been seated next to someone truly extraordinary. The hotel is about 10 minutes away, Daniel said, glancing at the vouchers. They have a shuttle running every 15 minutes. Thank you, again. Anna felt like she'd been saying that all evening, but she didn't know how else to express her gratitude. They joined the crowd waiting for the shuttle, Sophie chattering excitedly about room service and swimming pools. Anna was grateful for her daughter's resilience, her ability to find adventure in disruption. It was a trait Sophie had inherited from her grandmother, that gift for making the best of any situation. The shuttle was crowded, but not uncomfortably so. Anna found herself pressed against Daniel's side as more passengers boarded, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something clean and understated that reminded her of leather and cedar. Masculine without being overwhelming. Stop it, she told herself firmly. He's just being kind. Don't make this into something it's not. But as the shuttle pulled away from the airport and into the Nebraska night, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected detour was exactly where she was supposed to be. The hotel was a standard business traveler property, clean and efficient, if not luxurious. Daniel helped Anna navigate the check-in process, translating airline voucher codes and ensuring she got a room on the same floor as his. Not presumptuous, just practical. Are you hungry? he asked as they waited for the elevator. The restaurant's probably still open. Anna was exhausted, emotionally drained, and wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed. But Sophie was tugging on her sleeve, eyes bright with the promise of eating in a real restaurant instead of airplane peanuts. "Please, Mommy, can we eat with Mr. Daniel?" Anna looked at Daniel, searching his face for signs that this was an obligation rather than a genuine invitation. What she saw was patience and something that might have been hope. "If you're sure we wouldn't be imposing, you wouldn't be." The hotel restaurant was nearly empty, just a few other stranded passengers picking at late dinners. They claimed a booth in the corner, Sophie immediately fascinated by the tabletop jukebox that promised 3 songs for $1. "Can I play music, Mommy?" Anna was about to say no, she didn't have cash to spare on frivolous things, but Daniel was already sliding quarters across the table. "Pick something good," he told Sophie. While Sophie debated between Elton John and the Beatles, Anna studied the menu and tried not to think about how much this dinner would cost, even with the airline's meal voucher. Everything seemed overpriced, but Sophie needed to eat, and Anna's own stomach was hollow with grief and stress. "What looks good?" Daniel asked, settling into the booth across from her. "The grilled cheese and tomato soup," Sophie announced. "And chocolate milk." "Excellent choice." "Anna," she ordered a salad, something light that wouldn't upset her already fragile stomach. Daniel went with a burger and fries, food that seemed too normal for a man who'd just defended her honor at 30,000 feet. "So what do you do when you're not rescuing damsels in distress?" Anna asked, attempting lightness. "I'm not sure yet." The honesty in his answer surprised her. "You're between jobs, between lives more like." Sophie's music selection filled the silence. "Hey Jude," played at a volume that suggested the jukebox was older than the hotel itself. Anna was grateful for the distraction, because she recognized the look in Daniel's eyes. She'd seen it in her own mirror often enough. Their food arrived quickly, and Anna watched Daniel interact with Sophie throughout the meal. He answered her endless questions with patience, helped her cut her grilled cheese into perfect triangles, and listened to her rambling story about her best friend Emma's pet hamster, as if it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. "Do you have kids?" Sophie asked around a mouthful of sandwich. Daniel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Sophie," Anna warned gently. "That's not polite to ask." "It's okay," Daniel said, but Anna could see the shadow that crossed his face. "Just never worked out that way." Another story there, Anna realized. Another loss that shaped the careful way he moved through the world. They finished dinner in comfortable conversation, Sophie eventually falling asleep against Anna's shoulder as the day's exhaustion finally caught up with her. Anna looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and felt the familiar tug of fierce protectiveness mixed with overwhelming love. "She's beautiful," Daniel said quietly. "She's everything." The simple truth of it hung between them. Sophie was Anna's whole world, her reason for getting up every morning and fighting through days like this one. Everything else, her job, her apartment, her careful budget, existed in service to this small person who trusted her completely. "I should get her to bed," Anna said reluctantly. Part of her wanted to stay in this booth forever, suspended in this moment where someone else was sharing the weight of caring for Sophie. Daniel signaled for the check, ignoring Anna's protests. "My treat. Consider it payment for the entertainment." "You don't have to." "Anna." The way he said her name stopped her mid-sentence. "Let me do this." There was something in his voice that suggested this kindness was as much for him as for her. Maybe he needed to help someone to feel useful in a way his sudden civilian status hadn't provided. They rode the elevator to the fourth floor. In comfortable silence, Sophie dead weight in Anna's arms. Daniel walked them to their room, hovering in the hallway while Anna fumbled with the key card. "Thank you," she said when the door finally opened, "for everything today. I don't know what I would have done. You would have managed. You always do." How could he sound so certain about someone he'd known for less than 6 hours? Anna settled Sophie into one of the double beds, pulling off her shoes and covering her with the hotel comforter. Her daughter barely stirred, exhausted by grief and travel, and the kind of adventure that only seemed exciting when you were 6 years old. Anna's own bed looked inviting, but she found herself too wired to sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind: her mother's funeral, the cruel comments on the plane, Daniel's quiet strength, this unexpected stop in a city she'd never planned to visit. She changed into the oversized t-shirt she slept in and tried to settle down with the book she'd brought for the flight. But the words blurred together, and her mind kept wandering to the man in the room next door. A soft knock interrupted her restless thoughts. Anna checked the peephole and saw Daniel standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets. She opened the door carefully, mindful of not waking Sophie. "Everything okay?" she whispered. "I was going to ask you the same thing. You looked unsettled when we said goodnight." Anna glanced back at Sophie's sleeping form, then stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "I'm fine. Just processing, I guess." "Want to talk about it?" They were standing close in the narrow hallway, close enough that Anna could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough to notice that he'd changed into a simple gray t-shirt that revealed arms that spoke of regular workouts and physical labor. "I keep thinking about what those men said on the plane," she admitted. "The assumptions they made about my life. They were wrong. I am a single mother. Money is tight. Sophie's father isn't in the picture. That doesn't make you a welfare queen or a burden on society. That makes you human." Anna laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Easy for you to say. You don't know the whole story." "Then tell me." The invitation hung between them, simple and genuine. When was the last time someone had asked to hear her story? Really hear it, not just the sanitized version she gave to new colleagues or other parents at Sophie's school. "It's not very interesting," she warned. "I'll be the judge of that." Anna looked down the empty hallway, considering. She could go back to her room, maintain appropriate boundaries with this stranger who'd already seen too much of her vulnerability. Or she could take a risk, trust someone for the first time in longer than she could remember. "There's a vending machine down the hall," she said finally. "Want to get some coffee, and I'll tell you why those men weren't entirely wrong." Daniel's smile was soft in the fluorescent lighting. "Lead the way." They settled into 2 chairs by the vending machines, paper cups of terrible coffee warming their hands. The hotel was quiet around them, most of the stranded passengers having retired for the night. Anna felt like they were the only 2 people awake in the world. "I met Sophie's father when I was 24. She began staring into her coffee. "Marcus Chen. He was charming, funny, everything I thought I wanted. We were together 3 years before I got pregnant." Daniel waited, not pushing for details she wasn't ready to share. "He said he wanted the baby, said we'd figure it out together. But the reality was different. The sleepless nights, the constant crying, the way a baby changes everything about your life. He couldn't handle it. Started staying out later, working more hours, finding excuses not to be home." Anna took a sip of coffee and made a face. It was somehow both bitter and flavorless. "He left when Sophie was 18 months old. Said he needed space to figure things out. That was 4.5 years ago. Does he see her?" "Occasionally. Christmas usually, and sometimes her birthday. He sends money when he remembers, but it's sporadic." He moved to Seattle last year with his girlfriend and seems to think geography absolves him of responsibility. Anna felt the familiar surge of anger that came with talking about Marcus, not just for abandoning her, but for abandoning Sophie, who deserved so much better than a father who treated her like an inconvenience. Sophie doesn't really understand yet that other kids' dads live with them all the time, Anna continued. She thinks it's normal for Daddy to visit sometimes and live far away. I don't know how to explain that he chose to leave without making her feel like it was her fault. It wasn't. I know that. But try explaining it to a 6-year-old who just wants her family to look like everyone else's. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of the vending machines the only sound in the hallway. "What about you?" Anna asked. "Any family?" Daniel's expression shuddered slightly. "Not anymore." Another story he wasn't ready to tell. Anna recognized the signs and didn't push. They all had wounds that were still too tender to expose to strangers, no matter how kind those strangers might be. "The thing is," Anna said, returning to her own story, "those men on the plane weren't wrong about the financial part. I am struggling. Teaching doesn't pay much, especially in New York, and childcare costs are insane. Some months I have to choose between groceries and Sophie's dance classes. But you make it work." "Barely. My mother helped when she could, but she was on a fixed income too. I keep thinking there must be something I'm doing wrong, some way I could be better at this." "Anna," Daniel's voice was firm, "you buried your mother this morning and still managed to hold yourself together for your daughter all day. You're doing everything right." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Anna felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. She'd done enough crying for one day. "Sorry, it's been a long day." "Don't apologize. Grief is exhausting." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "You sound like you know." "I do." Daniel stared at his coffee cup for a long moment before speaking again. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer, like your mother. Fought it for 18 months before." He trailed off, but Anna didn't need him to finish. She understood the particular agony of watching someone you love waste away, of feeling helpless in the face of a disease that didn't care about hope or prayer or the strength of human will. "I'm sorry." Her name was Sarah. We were married 12 years, tried for kids the whole time. Never happened. The doctors said it was unexplained infertility, which is just medical speak for "we have no idea." Anna's heart ached for him. She thought about how natural he was with Sophie, how patiently he'd answered her questions. He would have been a wonderful father. "After she died, I couldn't do anything the same way anymore. The Air Force was understanding about the medical leave, but when I came back, I was different. Distracted. Made mistakes I'd never made before." "What kind of mistakes?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "The kind that get people hurt." Anna waited, sensing there was more to the story. 6 months ago, I was leading a training exercise with new pilots. Routine stuff, something I'd done hundreds of times. But I was thinking about Sarah, about something she'd said the night before she died, and I missed a critical instruction. One of the planes went into a spin, crashed on landing. Was anyone hurt? The pilot, kid named Tommy Martinez, 23 years old, broke his back. He'll never fly again. The pain in Daniel's voice was raw, immediate. Anna understood now why he'd left the Air Force, why he was between lives instead of between jobs. "It wasn't your fault," she said quietly. "Wasn't it? I was the instructor. My job was to keep those pilots safe, and I failed because I couldn't keep my personal grief from affecting my professional judgment." Anna recognized the self-recrimination in his voice because she heard it in her own head every time Sophie asked about her father. Every time money was tight, every time she felt like she was failing at the impossible task of being everything her daughter needed. "Grief makes us human," she said. "It doesn't make us failures." Daniel looked at her, then really looked, and Anna felt something shift between them. A recognition, maybe. The understanding that comes from meeting someone who carries similar wounds. Is that what you tell yourself when you're lying awake at night, wondering if you're doing enough for Sophie? The question hit too close to home. Anna felt exposed, as if this stranger could see straight through all her careful defenses, to the fear that lived at the center of everything. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've been lying awake wondering the same thing about Tommy Martinez for 6 months. Wondering if I'd done something different, been more focused, been better." "You'd still be beating yourself up about something else," Anna finished. "That's what we do. We blame ourselves for things beyond our control, because it feels better than admitting we're powerless." They sat in silence again, the weight of shared understanding settling between them. Anna felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the relief of being truly seen by another person. Not judged, not pitied, but seen. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said finally. "Of course." "Why teaching? With everything you've been through, why stay in a job that barely pays enough to survive?" Anna smiled for the first time all day, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Because of kids like Emma Rodriguez. She came into my class last year, barely speaking English, parents working 3 jobs between them, no confidence in herself at all. By Christmas, she was reading chapter books and helping other kids with their math homework. That's rewarding, but it doesn't pay the bills." "No, but do you remember what it felt like the first time you flew solo, that moment when you realized you could actually do this impossible thing?" Daniel nodded slowly. "That's what I see in my students' faces when they finally understand long division or write their first complete story. That moment when they realize they're capable of more than they thought. I can't give that up even when it means choosing between groceries and dance classes." Daniel studied her face in the harsh fluorescent lighting. "You're remarkable, you know that." Anna felt heat creep up her neck. "I'm really not. I'm just doing what I have to do. That's what makes it remarkable." The compliment settled warmly in Anna's chest, filling a space that had been empty for longer than she cared to admit. When was the last time someone had seen her as remarkable instead of just surviving? "I should probably try to get some sleep," she said reluctantly. "Sophie will be up early, and tomorrow's going to be another long day." "Right. Of course." They stood simultaneously, the spell of confession and connection, broken by the return of practical concerns. Anna wondered if Daniel felt the same reluctance to end this conversation, or if she was reading too much into a simple act of kindness from a stranger. "Anna," Daniel's voice stopped her as she reached for her room key. "Yeah. For what it's worth, I think Sophie's lucky to have you as a mother." The words hit her like a physical force. Anna had to blink back tears again, overwhelmed by how much she needed to hear that from someone who wasn't obligated to say it. "Thank you," she whispered. "And Anna, those men on the plane, they don't know anything about what makes a person valuable." He disappeared into his room before she could respond, leaving Anna standing in the empty hallway, with her heart racing and her carefully constructed walls in ruins around her feet. She let herself back into her room, quietly checking on Sophie before collapsing into her own bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she lay in the darkness, replaying every moment of the evening, from Daniel's quiet authority on the plane to his gentle confession over terrible vending machine coffee. She thought about the way he'd looked at her when she talked about teaching, as if her dedication to her students was something extraordinary instead of simply necessary. She thought about the pain in his voice when he talked about Tommy Martinez, the way guilt and grief had shaped him into someone who defended strangers and noticed when single mothers were struggling. Most of all, she thought about the warmth in his eyes when he looked at Sophie, the easy way he'd stepped into the role of protector and provider without making Anna feel diminished or dependent. It was dangerous, this growing attraction to a man she barely knew. Anna had learned to be suspicious of her own judgment when it came to men. Marcus had seemed wonderful too in the beginning, charming and attentive and everything she thought she wanted. But there was something different about Daniel. A steadiness that Marcus had never possessed, a depth that came from real loss and genuine strength. He wasn't performing kindness to impress her. He was simply being kind because that's who he was. Anna rolled over and looked at Sophie's sleeping face, so peaceful in the glow of the hotel's emergency lighting. Her daughter deserved stability, deserved someone who would stay and build something lasting instead of disappearing when things got difficult. Could Daniel be that person? Or was Anna just projecting her own desperate need for partnership onto the first man who'd shown her genuine kindness in years? She didn't know. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Anna found herself hoping that tomorrow's flight would be delayed just a little bit longer. Anna woke to the sound of Sophie giggling, a sound that had become increasingly rare since her mother's death. For a moment she forgot where they were, disoriented by the unfamiliar hotel room and the pale morning light filtering through synthetic curtains. Then memory flooded back the plane, the storm, Daniel's quiet strength in the face of cruelty. "Mommy, look." Sophie was pressed against the window, pointing at something in the parking lot below. "There's a dog down there, and he's wearing a little coat." Anna rolled out of bed, her body protesting after a night on an unfamiliar mattress. The digital clock read 6:47 a.m., too early for a Saturday, but Sophie's internal alarm clock didn't recognize weekends or travel delays. "That's nice, sweetheart. Why don't you get dressed while Mommy takes a shower?" The hotel bathroom was standard issue, small but clean, with tiny bottles of shampoo that smelled like artificial flowers. Anna stood under the hot water longer than necessary, letting it wash away the previous day's accumulated stress. But her mind kept drifting to Daniel, to the vulnerability they'd shared in that empty hallway, to the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of simply exhausted. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, making a mental note to pack an extra outfit next time they traveled. If there was a next time. Without her mother's occasional help with expenses, Anna wasn't sure when she'd be able to afford another trip. "Can we have breakfast with Mr. Assar?" "Daniel," Sophie asked, as Anna helped her into a clean dress from their carry-on. "He might have other plans, sweetheart. He's been very kind, but we shouldn't assume." A soft knock interrupted her protests. Anna's heart did something complicated in her chest as she opened the door to find Daniel standing in the hallway, freshly showered and holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this, Phil," he said, offering her one of the cups. "You're a lifesaver." Anna accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. It was infinitely better than last night's vending machine disaster. "How did you know I was awake?" Heard Sophie laughing through the wall. "Figured it was safe to assume you were up too." The casual observation that he'd been listening for signs of their morning routine sent warmth spreading through Anna's chest. When was the last time someone had paid attention to her patterns, her needs without being asked? "Mr. Daniel?" Sophie appeared at Anna's elbow, beaming up at him. "Will you eat breakfast with us? They have pancakes." Daniel's eyes met Anna's over Sophie's head, asking permission. The careful way he deferred to Anna's parental authority, never overstepping or assuming, made her throat tight with appreciation. If your mom says it's okay, he told Sophie. Please, Mommy, he can tell us more about flying. Anna looked at Daniel's patient expression, at Sophie's hopeful face, and felt her carefully maintained boundaries wavering. She'd spent 6 years learning to be sufficient for her daughter, to not need anyone else's help or company. But the prospect of sharing breakfast with someone who genuinely enjoyed Sophie's company was too tempting to resist. Okay, but we need to be quick. I want to check with the airline about today's flights. The hotel restaurant was busier than it had been the night before, filled with other stranded passengers clutching coffee and checking phones for updates. They found a table near the window where Sophie could continue her fascination with the parking lot dog while they waited for their food. Any word on departures? Anna asked, scrolling through the airline's app on her phone. Checked an hour ago, Daniel said. Weather's clearing, but they're still working through the backlog. Probably won't start rebooking until mid-morning. Anna's stomach tightened. Every hour of delay meant more complications. Mrs. Chen watching Whiskers longer than planned. Anna potentially missing Monday's faculty meeting, the general disruption to the careful routine that kept their lives functioning. Hey, Daniel's voice was gentle. It's going to work out. You keep saying that, but you don't know that. You don't understand how carefully I have to plan everything. One missed day of work could mean Anna. The way he said her name stopped her spiral of anxiety. What's the worst thing that could actually happen? She stared at him, thrown by the directness of the question. I could lose my job. For missing one day due to weather. No, but what else? Sophie could miss school, fall behind. One day. Anna realized how irrational she sounded, but the fear was deeply ingrained. Single motherhood had taught her that small problems could cascade into disasters if she wasn't vigilant. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't afford for anything to go wrong. There's no backup plan, no safety net. It's just me. Sophie looked up from her menu, picking up on the tension in Anna's voice. Are we in trouble, Mommy? No, sweetheart. Mommy's just worried about getting home on time. But Mr. Daniel said it would work out, Sophie said with the absolute faith of childhood. And he knows about flying. Daniel met Anna's eyes across the table, and she saw understanding there. He recognized the weight of being solely responsible for another person's welfare, the exhausting vigilance required to keep all the pieces in motion. Your mom's right to be careful, he told Sophie. That's what good moms do, they make sure everything's taken care of. The validation meant more to Anna than he could possibly know. So often people interpreted her caution as anxiety, her planning as control issues. Daniel saw it for what it was, the necessary hypervigilance of single parenthood. Their food arrived: pancakes for Sophie, eggs Benedict for Anna, and a substantial breakfast platter for Daniel. Anna watched him interact with her daughter throughout the meal, answering questions about airplane engines and weather patterns with the patient detail of someone who genuinely enjoyed teaching. Did you ever crash? Sophie asked around a mouthful of syrup-soaked pancakes. Sophie, Anna warned, that's not appropriate. It's okay, Daniel said. No crashes, but I did have some close calls. That's part of learning to fly safely, understanding what can go wrong and how to handle it. Were you scared? Daniel considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But fear isn't necessarily bad. It keeps you alert, makes you more careful. The trick is not letting it stop you from doing what you need to do. Anna felt like he was speaking directly to her, offering wisdom that applied to more than just aviation. How many times had fear held her back from taking risks that might have improved their situation? How many opportunities had she missed because the potential for failure seemed too dangerous? Can girls be pilots too? Sophie asked. Absolutely. Some of the best pilots I've known were women. Sophie's eyes lit up with possibility. Maybe I'll be a pilot when I grow up. Or a teacher like Mommy. Or maybe both. You can be anything you want, Daniel told her with conviction that made Anna's chest tight. Your mom's already teaching you the most important lesson, how to be brave even when things are scary. Anna looked away, overwhelmed by the casual way he affirmed her parenting, the natural way he included himself in their conversation, as if he belonged there. It was dangerous, this feeling of rightness, of completeness she hadn't known she was missing. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Anna glanced at it, expecting an update from the airline, and felt her heart sink. What is it? Daniel asked, noticing her expression. Mrs. Chen. She's in the emergency room. Anna's hands shook as she read the message more carefully. Her elderly neighbor who'd been watching Whiskers had fallen and broken her hip. She was being admitted to the hospital and couldn't take care of the cat any longer. I have to get home, Anna said, panic creeping into her voice. Right now, Mrs. Chen doesn't have family nearby, and Whiskers is probably terrified and… Anna, breathe. Daniel's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. What exactly does the message say? Anna read it aloud, her voice shaking. Mrs. Chen was stable but would be hospitalized for several days. A neighbor had let Whiskers back into Anna's apartment, but someone needed to check on the cat and ensure Mrs. Chen's apartment was secure. I'll call the airline, Anna said, already reaching for her phone. See if I can get on an earlier flight, maybe through a different city. Anna, stop. Daniel reached across the table and gently took her phone from her hands. You're spiraling. I'm problem-solving. You're panicking. There's a difference. Sophie looked between them with wide eyes, picking up on the tension, despite not understanding the details. Anna realized she was scaring her daughter with her frantic energy and forced herself to take a deep breath. You're right, she admitted, but I don't know what else to do. Mrs. Chen has been so good to us, and now she's hurt and alone, and it's all because she was helping me. It's not your fault, Daniel said firmly. Accidents happen. The best thing you can do now is figure out the most practical way to help. He was right, of course. Anna's tendency to catastrophize wasn't helping anyone. She needed to think clearly, make rational decisions instead of emotional ones. What would you suggest? First, call Mrs. Chen's hospital and check on her condition. Get the facts before you assume the worst. Then contact your building manager about checking on your apartment. Most of these problems can be solved with phone calls rather than panic. Anna nodded, already feeling calmer with a concrete plan of action. This was what she'd been missing, someone to help her think through problems instead of facing every crisis alone. Can I help with anything else? Daniel asked. You've done enough, more than enough. Anna meant it, but she also recognized that accepting too much help from him would be dangerous. She was already becoming too dependent on his steadying presence, too comfortable with the idea of sharing her burdens. What if I don't want to stop helping? The quiet question hung between them, loaded with implications Anna wasn't sure she was ready to explore. Sophie was absorbed in cutting her pancakes into perfect squares, oblivious to the adult undercurrents swirling around her. Daniel, I know we just met. I know this is crazy, but I haven't felt useful in months, and being around you and Sophie, it reminds me who I used to be before everything went wrong. Anna studied his face, looking for signs of pity or some savior complex that would make this easier to reject. What she saw instead was genuine affection, a man who'd found purpose in caring about their welfare. You don't owe us anything, she said carefully. I know. That's not what this is about. Before Anna could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar local number. Hello. Ms. Carter, this is Dr. Williams from Nebraska Medical Center. I'm calling about your neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Anna's heart stopped. Is she okay? She's stable, but I wanted to discuss her condition with you since you're listed as her emergency contact. Anna blinked in surprise. She hadn't known Mrs. Chen had listed her as an emergency contact, though it made sense given the older woman's lack of nearby family. Of course. How is she? The conversation with Dr. Williams was both reassuring and sobering. Mrs. Chen had indeed broken her hip, but the fracture was clean and should heal well with proper care. She'd be hospitalized for several more days, then moved to a rehabilitation facility for a few weeks. She's been asking about her cat, the doctor said. Seems quite worried about the animal. I'll take care of Whiskers, Anna promised. Please tell her not to worry about anything at home. When Anna hung up, she found Daniel and Sophie watching her expectantly. Mrs. Chen is going to be fine, she told them. But she'll be in the hospital for a while, then rehab. I need to figure out long-term care for Whiskers. Could we keep both cats? Sophie asked hopefully. Whiskers and our Mittens could be friends. Anna's heart clenched at the innocent suggestion. Their lease only allowed one pet, and she couldn't afford the deposit for a second animal, even if their landlord agreed. But the thought of Mrs. Chen worrying about her beloved cat while recovering from surgery was unbearable. We'll figure something out, she told Sophie, though she had no idea how. What if Whiskers stayed with me temporarily? Daniel said quietly. Anna stared at him. You'd do that? I'm between apartments anyway. Staying in temporary housing on base until I figure out what's next. One more cat wouldn't make a difference. You don't even know us, Anna protested, though part of her was already calculating how much this would solve. Why would you take responsibility for a stranger's pet? Because you need help and I'm in a position to give it. Sometimes it's that simple. Anna felt tears threatening again. The casual generosity, the way he stepped in without making her feel diminished or dependent. It was so different from anything she'd experienced with Marcus or any other man in her life. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sophie clapped her hands together. Mr. Daniel could visit Whiskers, and we could visit Mr. Daniel, and maybe they could have play dates. Anna couldn't help smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm, even as her mind reeled with the implications. Accepting Daniel's help would mean staying in contact, creating ongoing obligations between them. It would mean admitting she couldn't handle everything alone. Anna, Daniel said gently, let me help you. The simple plea broke through her last defenses. Anna nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. They spent the next hour making practical arrangements. Daniel would fly back to New York with them, collect Whiskers from Anna's apartment, and take the cat to his temporary quarters. Anna would visit Mrs. Chen in the hospital once they returned, and coordinate longer-term care arrangements. The airline had finally started rebooking passengers on afternoon flights. Anna found herself disappointed when Daniel secured them seats on the 2:30 p.m. departure. She wasn't ready for this unexpected intimacy to end. Back in her hotel room, Anna helped Sophie pack their few belongings while wrestling with conflicting emotions. Part of her was grateful beyond measure for Daniel's intervention in their crisis. Another part was terrified by how quickly she'd come to depend on his presence, how natural it felt to include him in their decisions. I like Mr. Daniel, Sophie announced, folding her dress with the careful precision Anna had taught her. He's nice to us. Yes, he is. Do you think he'll still want to be our friend when we get home? The innocent question cut straight to Anna's deepest fear. What happened when the crisis passed and Daniel returned to his own life? Would he realize that helping them had been a momentary impulse rather than a lasting commitment. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to see." "I hope so. It's nice having someone else to talk to besides you and Mittens." Anna's heart clenched at the unintentional revelation. Sophie was lonely too, craving adult interaction beyond what Anna could provide. The thought of her sociable daughter being isolated by Anna's protective caution was almost unbearable. A knock at the door interrupted her self-recrimination. Daniel stood in the hallway with his bag ready for checkout. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her expression. "Just thinking." "About—" Anna glanced at Sophie, who was absorbed in her coloring book, then stepped into the hallway for privacy. "About what happens after today. You've been incredibly kind, but I don't want Sophie getting attached to someone who's going to disappear from her life." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "Is that what you think I'm going to do, disappear? I think you're a good man who helped strangers in crisis. But once the crisis passes—" "Anna, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, seeing something there that made her breath catch. "I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." The certainty in his voice sent warmth flooding through her chest, followed immediately by terror. What if she let herself believe him? What if she opened her heart and Sophie's to this man, only to have him realize that their daily reality was too complicated, too demanding? "You don't know what you're signing up for," she said. "Single motherhood isn't romantic. It's exhausting and thankless and—" "Anna." Daniel stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his aftershave, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I know exactly what I'm signing up for. The question is whether you're brave enough to let me." The challenge in his voice made her spine straighten. Anna had faced down bureaucratic systems and unsympathetic landlords and her ex-husband's abandonment. She'd rebuilt her life from scratch more than once. But the prospect of trusting someone with her heart, and more importantly Sophie's, felt like the most terrifying risk she'd ever contemplated. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. I'll still be here." They rode the shuttle to the airport in comfortable silence, Sophie chattering between them about the dog in the hotel parking lot and her excitement about flying again. Anna watched Daniel interact with her daughter, patient, engaged, genuinely interested in a 6-year-old's observations about the world, and felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. The airport was chaos, filled with passengers trying to rebook on limited flights. Anna's anxiety spiked as she surveyed the crowds, but Daniel navigated the confusion with military efficiency. Within minutes, he'd confirmed their seats, checked their bags, and guided them to a relatively quiet gate area. "How do you do that?" Anna asked, as they settled into chairs near their boarding gate. "Do what? Make everything look so easy. I would have spent an hour in that check-in line, probably missed the flight, definitely had a panic attack." Daniel shrugged. "Practice, I guess. 20 years of military travel teaches you how to work the system." "What else does 20 years of military service teach you?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie color in her activity book. "That most problems have solutions if you break them down into manageable pieces. That panic is the enemy of clear thinking. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help." Anna felt like he was speaking directly to her again, offering lessons she desperately needed to learn. "And what does losing someone you love teach you?" she asked quietly. Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "That life's too short to waste time being afraid of taking risks. That regret is heavier than failure." Before Anna could respond, the gate agent announced boarding for their flight. They gathered their belongings and joined the line, Sophie bouncing with excitement about flying again. Will we sit together this time too? Sophie asked Daniel as they moved toward the gate. I hope so, he replied, glancing at Anna for confirmation. Anna nodded, surprised by how much she wanted his steady presence beside her for the flight home. 24 hours ago, she would have been perfectly content traveling alone with Sophie. Now the thought of returning to their normal routine, just the two of them against the world, felt inexplicably lonely. The flight was uneventful, a direct route to LaGuardia that had them on the ground by late afternoon. Sophie slept most of the way, exhausted by 2 days of travel and emotional upheaval. Anna found herself talking quietly with Daniel about everything and nothing, her students, his favorite flying routes, their shared love of old movies. What's your favorite? Anna asked, as the plane began its descent into New York. Movie, probably The Princess Bride. Classic adventure, great dialogue. True love conquers all. Anna smiled. I wouldn't have pegged you for a romantic. There's a lot you don't know about me yet. The word yet hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Anna felt her heart do that complicated flutter again, hope and fear warring in her chest. LaGuardia was its usual chaotic self, crowded, noisy, everyone in a hurry to get somewhere else. Anna collected their checked bag while Daniel retrieved his, both of them, moving through the familiar routine of arrival. Where are you parked? Daniel asked as they made their way toward ground transportation. I took the subway. Parking's too expensive. Right, of course. Daniel paused, recalculating. Would you like me to call us a cab? My treat. Anna was about to refuse. She'd imposed on his generosity enough when Sophie tugged on her sleeve. Mommy, I'm really tired. Could we ride in a car instead of the train? Looking at her daughter's exhausted face, Anna realized how much she'd been asking of Sophie these past few days. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to be strong and patient and accommodating while her mother fell apart with grief. Okay, sweetheart. We'll take a cab. The ride to Queens took 40 minutes in Sunday evening traffic, giving Anna time to watch familiar neighborhoods slide past the windows. Her apartment building looked exactly the same, a modest brick structure that had seen better decades, but offered affordable rent and decent schools nearby. This is us, Anna said, as the cab pulled up to the curb. Daniel paid the driver over her protests, then helped carry their bags to the building entrance. Anna fumbled with her keys, suddenly nervous about inviting him upstairs. The transition from travel companions to whatever they were becoming felt awkward, uncertain. Do you want to come up? She asked finally. To get Whiskers, I mean. If that's okay. Anna's apartment was small but comfortable, decorated with Sophie's artwork and furniture she'd collected over the years from thrift stores and garage sales. She felt self-conscious, seeing it through Daniel's eyes, the patched sofa, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, the general wear that came with making do on a tight budget. But Daniel didn't seem to notice any of that. Instead, he was focused on the gray tabby cat, who emerged from the bedroom, meowing plaintively. That's Mittens, Sophie announced, scooping up their cat. Whiskers must be hiding. She's probably scared because we were gone so long. Anna found Mrs. Chen's cat under the kitchen table, a black and white, long-haired beauty who looked thoroughly offended by the disruption to her routine. Hey, gorgeous, Daniel said, crouching down to let Whiskers sniff his hand. Ready to come stay with me for a while? The cat, apparently won over by his quiet tone, allowed herself to be picked up. Anna watched Daniel hold Whiskers with gentle competence and felt something settle into place in her chest. Are you sure about this? She asked one more time. Positive. I could use the company. Anna gathered Whiskers' supplies, food toys, the small bed Mrs. Chen had sent over, while Daniel exchanged phone numbers with Sophie, solemnly promising to send pictures of Whiskers in her new temporary home. When will we see you again? Sophie asked, as they prepared to leave. Daniel looked at Anna questioningly. "That's up to your mom." Anna felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She could thank him politely, keep this contained to a weekend of extraordinary kindness from a stranger. Or she could take the risk he'd offered, open her carefully guarded life to the possibility of something more. "Maybe we could have dinner sometime this week," she heard herself say. "To check on Whiskers, of course." Daniel's smile was soft understanding. "I'd like that. To check on Whiskers." After he left with the cat, and promises to call the next day, Anna sat on her couch with Sophie curled against her side and tried to process everything that had changed. 48 hours ago, she'd been alone in her grief, struggling to hold her small family together through sheer force of will. Now there was someone else who knew about Mrs. Chen's surgery, who'd taken responsibility for a problem Anna couldn't solve alone, who'd looked at her daughter with genuine affection and asked when he could see them again. "Mommy." Sophie's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad the storm made us stay in that hotel. Even though it was scary, it turned out okay." Anna pressed a kiss to the top of her daughter's head, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It turned out okay." But as she carried Sophie to bed and began the familiar routine of their evening, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that okay was an understatement. Something fundamental had shifted during their unexpected detour, something that couldn't be undone by returning to familiar routines. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing tomorrow alone. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, a reminder that the biggest risks sometimes brought the greatest rewards. As she settled into bed that night, Anna's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Whiskers is settled in and purring. She says to tell Sophie good night." The message was accompanied by a photo of the cat curled up on what looked like a military-issue blanket, looking perfectly content in her temporary home. Anna smiled as she typed back, "Thank you for everything." Daniel's response came quickly. "Sweet dreams, Anna. See you soon." Anna set her phone aside and closed her eyes, but sleep was elusive. Instead, she lay in the darkness, thinking about the man who'd stepped into their crisis with quiet strength, who'd seen her struggling and offered help without making her feel weak. Tomorrow would bring the return to routine work school, the careful budgeting of time and resources that defined her daily existence. But now there was also the promise of dinner sometime this week, of phone calls and shared responsibility for Mrs. Chen's recovery of someone who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and hadn't turned away. Anna had spent 6 years learning to be sufficient unto herself, to need no one's help or approval. But maybe, just maybe, there was room in her carefully constructed life for someone who wanted to share the load. The thought followed her into sleep, where she dreamed of storms that led to unexpected destinations and strangers who became something more precious than safety. The next morning arrived too early, bringing with it the harsh fluorescent lights of PS 47 and the familiar chaos of third graders returning from a weekend. Anna stood at her classroom door, greeting each student with the practiced smile she'd perfected over 8 years of teaching, but her mind kept drifting to the quiet man who was probably feeding Mrs. Chen's cat breakfast in some temporary military housing across the city. "Miss Carter, you look different," announced Emma Rodriguez, the same student Anna had mentioned to Daniel just days ago. "Did you get a haircut?" Anna touched her hair self-consciously. She'd taken extra care with her appearance this morning, choosing her favorite blue dress and actually wearing the lipstick that usually stayed buried in her purse. "No haircut, Emma, just a good weekend." It wasn't entirely true. The weekend had been emotionally devastating, and unexpectedly transformative in equal measure. But standing here in her classroom watching her students settle into their morning routines, Anna felt something she hadn't experienced in months: anticipation instead of mere endurance. Her phone buzzed with a text as the children organized their backpacks and homework folders. Anna glanced at it discreetly, her heart doing that familiar flutter when she saw Daniel's name on the screen. Whiskers ate a full breakfast and is currently judging my choice of morning news programs. Hope your first day back is going well. The message was accompanied by a photo of the cat sitting regally on what looked like a standard-issue military desk, green eyes fixed on the camera with typical feline disdain. Anna typed back quickly. She's always been opinionated. Thank you for the update. Miss Carter? 7-year-old Marcus Thompson was standing beside her desk, holding a crumpled piece of paper. My mom says you were at my grandma's funeral this weekend. Are you sad? Anna's throat tightened. She'd forgotten that Marcus was Ruth Carter's great-nephew, that the web of her mother's relationships extended into her professional life in ways she sometimes overlooked. Yes, sweetheart. I am sad. But I'm also grateful that I got to know your great-grandma. She was a wonderful woman. My mom says when people die, they become angels and watch over us. Do you think Miss Ruth is watching over you now? The innocent question nearly undid her. Anna knelt down to Marcus's eye level, seeing her mother's kind eyes reflected in this child who'd inherited her gentle spirit. I think she's watching over all of us, Anna said quietly. And I think she'd be very proud to see what a thoughtful, caring boy you've become. Marcus beamed and returned to his seat, satisfied with her answer. Anna remained crouched by her desk for a moment longer, collecting herself before facing the day ahead. The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of elementary education, math worksheets, reading groups, the perpetual negotiation of 7-year-old social dynamics. But Anna found herself more patient than usual, more present with her students' questions and concerns. Something about the weekend's events had stripped away a layer of protective numbness she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. During lunch, she escaped to the faculty lounge to call the hospital and check on Mrs. Chen. The older woman sounded tired but determined, asking more questions about Whiskers than about her own recovery. You're sure this Daniel person is trustworthy? Mrs. Chen asked for the third time. Whiskers is very particular about people. Anna paused, searching for words that could capture Daniel's quiet competence without revealing how much he'd come to mean to her in such a short time. He's very responsible, and Whiskers seems to like him. Good. That cat is an excellent judge of character. If she trusts him, I suppose I can too. After the call, Anna sat in the empty lounge picking at her sandwich and thinking about trust. Mrs. Chen was right about Whiskers being a good judge of character. The cat had immediately disliked Marcus during his few visits to the apartment, sensing something selfish and unreliable in him that Anna had been too infatuated to recognize. But Whiskers had allowed Daniel to pick her up within minutes of meeting him, had settled into his arms with the kind of feline acceptance that couldn't be faked or coerced. You look like someone who's processing big thoughts, said a voice from the doorway. Anna looked up to see Janet Morrison, the school's guidance counselor, and her closest friend among the faculty. Janet was in her 50s, divorced, and had survived her own share of romantic disasters with enough wisdom to offer good advice when Anna needed it. Just thinking about the weekend, Anna said, making room for Janet at the small table. How was the funeral? I know how close you were to your mother. Anna gave Janet the abbreviated version, the service, the flight delay, the unexpected overnight in Nebraska. She found herself editing out most of the details about Daniel, uncertain how to explain his significance without sounding like a woman who'd lost her mind over a stranger. But Janet had spent 20 years reading between the lines of human behavior, and something in Anna's carefully neutral tone made her lean forward with interest. "You're leaving something out," Janet observed. "Something important." Anna sighed, recognizing the futility of hiding anything from someone trained to detect emotional undercurrents. "There was a man on the plane. He helped us when some passengers were being cruel, then again, when Mrs. Chen got hurt. He's watching her cat while she recovers. And nothing. He was kind to strangers in crisis. That's all." Janet's smile was knowing. "Anna, honey, I've known you for 3 years. You've never mentioned a man's existence unless he was causing problems in your classroom or demanding child support. This one made enough of an impression for you to trust him with Mrs. Chen's beloved cat. That's not nothing." Anna felt heat creep up her neck. "It's complicated." "The best ones usually are. What's his story?" Against her better judgment, Anna found herself telling Janet about Daniel's military background, his recent losses, the quiet strength he'd shown in handling both their crisis and his own grief. Janet listened without interruption, her expression growing more intrigued with each detail. "He sounds like a good man who's been through hell," Janet said when Anna finished. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. Maybe. I don't know." Anna rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar tension headache that came with emotional uncertainty. Sophie's already attached to him. What if this is just some post-traumatic rescue fantasy and he disappears once reality sets in? What if it isn't? The simple question hung between them, challenging all of Anna's careful defenses. "I can't afford to be wrong about this," Anna said finally. "Not just for me, but for Sophie. She's already been abandoned by one man who claimed to care about her." "Anna, look at me." Janet's voice was gentle but firm. "You've spent 6 years building walls around your heart because Marcus was selfish and immature. But not every man is Marcus. And more importantly, you're not the same woman who fell for his charm. You're stronger now, more discerning. Trust your instincts." "My instincts told me Marcus was wonderful too." "No, your desperation told you Marcus was wonderful. Your loneliness convinced you to ignore red flags you absolutely saw. This time is different." Anna wanted to argue to maintain the protective cynicism that had kept her safe for so long. But she couldn't deny that her response to Daniel felt fundamentally different from the giddy infatuation she'd experienced with Marcus. This was deeper, steadier, based on what she'd observed about his character, rather than what she'd projected onto his potential. Her phone buzzed again. "Another message from Daniel Whiskers has claimed my reading chair. I think she's trying to tell me something about territorial boundaries." This time the photo showed the cat sprawled across a worn leather recliner, looking supremely satisfied with her conquest. Anna showed the image to Janet, who laughed out loud. "That cat knows quality when she sees it, both in furniture and in men, apparently." "It's just a chair," Anna protested, but she was smiling despite herself. "Honey, that's a man's favorite chair. The fact that he's letting a borrowed cat take it over tells me everything I need to know about his priorities." The afternoon flew by in a blur of spelling tests and art projects. Anna found herself checking her phone more often than usual, looking forward to Daniel's periodic updates about Whisker's adjustment to her temporary home. Each message was brief, practical, but they carried an undercurrent of warmth that made Anna's chest tight with unnamed longing. "Whiskers has discovered the heating vent under my desk. I may never see her again. Your cat appears to be redecorating. She's moved her food bowl to the living room and her bed to the bathroom. I'm taking notes for when I get a place of my own." Question: Is it normal for cats to judge your music choices asking for a friend? By the time Anna was walking to the subway after school, She'd accumulated a small gallery of photos showing Whiskers exploring Daniel's temporary quarters with typical feline curiosity. The images revealed more about Daniel's living situation than he'd probably intended: sparse but clean military housing, a few books on leadership and aviation, a coffee mug from some Air Force base she didn't recognize. The subway ride to Sophie's after-school program gave Anna time to think about Janet's advice. Was she letting fear keep her from exploring something that might be genuinely good, or was she being appropriately cautious about protecting herself and her daughter from another potential heartbreak? Sophie was waiting by the program director's desk when Anna arrived, backpack already shouldered and ready to go. "Mommy, did Mr. Daniel send pictures of Whiskers today? I want to see." Anna's heart clenched at her daughter's enthusiasm. Sophie had been asking about Daniel and Whiskers all morning, clearly hoping for continued contact with the man who'd shown her such patient attention over the weekend. They found seats on the crowded subway, and Anna showed Sophie the day's collection of cat photos. Her daughter giggled at each image, making up stories about Whiskers' adventures in her new temporary home. "Look, she's guarding Mr. Daniel's books. She's probably keeping them safe from book thieves." "Book thieves?" Anna asked, amused by Sophie's imagination. "Very dangerous criminals who steal books from nice people. Whiskers is protecting him." Anna studied her daughter's animated face and realized that Sophie had already woven Daniel into her mental map of important people. It wasn't just attachment, it was the kind of easy acceptance that children reserved for adults they instinctively trusted. "Sophie, you know Mr. Daniel is just helping us temporarily, right? He has his own life, his own plans." Sophie's expression grew serious. "But he likes us, doesn't he? He said he wanted to have dinner with us." "Yes, he said that. But sometimes grown-ups change their minds about things. Did Daddy change his mind about us?" The question hit Anna like a physical blow. They'd had variations of this conversation before, but Sophie's growing awareness of other family structures was making her more direct about the absence in their own lives. "Your daddy loves you," Anna said carefully. "But sometimes people aren't able to be the parents they want to be, and they make choices that hurt the people they love." "Is Mr. Daniel going to make choices that hurt us?" Anna looked into her daughter's trusting eyes and realized she had no answer that wouldn't be either a lie or a promise she couldn't keep. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I promise that whatever happens, we'll be okay. We always figure it out together, don't we?" Sophie nodded, satisfied for the moment with Anna's assurance. But Anna could see the questions forming behind her daughter's eyes, the growing awareness that their family structure wasn't the norm, and that other children had fathers who came home every night. Their apartment felt empty when they returned, missing the comforting presence of both cats. Anna went through the motions of their evening routine: dinner, homework, bath time, but her mind kept drifting to Daniel and the decision she'd been avoiding all day. He'd asked when he could see them again. She'd suggested dinner sometime this week. The ball was in her court, and the longer she waited to make contact, the more awkward it would become. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice came from the bathroom where she was supposed to be brushing her teeth. "Yes." "Could we call Mr. Daniel and see how Whiskers is doing?" The request gave Anna the excuse she'd been looking for. It would be natural to check on Mrs. Chen's cat, responsible even. The fact that hearing Daniel's voice would settle something restless in her chest was entirely beside the point. "I suppose we could call for a few minutes." Sophie emerged from the bathroom with toothpaste still on her chin, bouncing with excitement. Anna wiped her daughter's face and helped her into pajamas, then settled on the couch with her phone. Daniel answered on the second ring, his voice warm with what sounded like genuine pleasure at hearing from them. "Anna, how was your first day back?" "Good. Long but good. How's our borrowed cat?" currently asleep in my bed despite having 3 other perfectly good sleeping options available to her. I think she's testing my boundaries." Anna could hear the smile in his voice, and it sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Can I talk to him?" Sophie whispered loudly. Anna handed over the phone, watching her daughter's face light up as she began an animated conversation with Daniel about Whisker's daily adventures. She ate all her breakfast and then sat by the window watching birds for like an hour, Sophie reported. "Mr. Daniel says she's probably making plans to catch them, but the window is closed, so the birds are safe." Anna listened to Sophie's side of the conversation, struck by how natural this felt. How many evenings had she wished for another adult voice in their apartment, someone to share the small moments and daily observations that made up the texture of family life. "Mommy, Mr. Daniel wants to talk to you again." Anna took back the phone, acutely aware that Sophie was listening to every word. "She's settling in well," Daniel said. "No signs of stress, eating normally, very interested in my reading material. Thank you for the updates today. I know Mrs. Chen appreciates knowing Whiskers is in good hands." "It's my pleasure. Actually, I was wondering, would you like to come by tomorrow evening? Sophie could see Whiskers, and we could figure out that dinner we talked about." Anna's heart rate picked up. This was it, the moment of decision she'd been circling all day. "That sounds nice," she heard herself say. "What time works for you?" They made arrangements for the next evening. Anna would pick up Sophie from her after-school program, and they'd take the subway to Daniel's temporary housing on the base. It was practical, sensible, just checking on the cat and sharing a meal with someone who'd been kind to them. It was also the scariest thing Anna had done in years. After Sophie was asleep, Anna stood in her bedroom trying to decide what to wear to dinner with a man she barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. Everything in her closet seemed either too formal or too casual, too revealing or too frumpy. Finally, she settled on dark jeans and a green sweater that brought out her eyes, an outfit that said she'd made an effort without trying too hard. She was being ridiculous, she knew. This wasn't a date, it was a practical arrangement to check on a borrowed cat and share a meal. But her hands were shaking as she hung the sweater on her door, and she knew it had nothing to do with concern for Mrs. Chen's pet. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Anna found herself checking the clock, constantly alternating between anticipation and terror as evening approached. Her students picked up on her distracted energy, and she had to redirect her attention to their needs more often than usual. "Miss Carter, are you getting married?" asked Emma Rodriguez during afternoon reading time. Anna nearly choked on her coffee. "What makes you ask that?" "Emma, you keep smiling at nothing, and your face gets red when you look at your phone. My sister did that when she was dating her boyfriend." Anna realized she'd been checking for messages from Daniel throughout the day, smiling at his periodic updates about Whiskers' ongoing territorial expansion in his apartment. "I'm just having a good day," Anna told Emma, which wasn't entirely untrue. The afternoon parent conference she'd scheduled with the Hendersons ran longer than expected, discussing their son Tyler's struggles with reading comprehension. By the time Anna made it to Sophie's after-school program, she was running 15 minutes behind schedule and convinced that Daniel would think they weren't coming. "I'm sorry I'm late," Anna said, as Sophie gathered her things. "It's okay. Are we still going to see Mr. Daniel and Whiskers?" "Yes, but we need to hurry." They made it to the military base with 10 minutes to spare. Anna's nerves increasing with each subway stop. She'd never been on a military installation before, and the security procedures were more complex than she'd expected. Daniel met them at the visitors center, handling the paperwork and clearances with practiced efficiency. "Sorry about all the bureaucracy," he said, as they walked toward his building. "The military loves its protocols." "It's fine," Anna said, though she was acutely aware of how out of place she felt in this environment. Everyone they passed looked competent and purposeful, dressed in uniforms, or the kind of casual clothes that suggested they belonged here in ways she clearly didn't. Daniel's apartment was on the third floor of a utilitarian building that could have been student housing anywhere in America. But when he opened the door, Anna was surprised by how welcoming the space felt, despite its institutional origins. "Whiskers," Sophie called out as soon as they entered. The cat appeared from the kitchen, meowing with apparent delight at seeing familiar faces. Sophie dropped to the floor for proper cat greetings, and Whiskers submitted to being petted with the regal patience of feline royalty. "She looks great," Anna said, and meant it. Whiskers seemed completely at ease in her temporary home, moving through Daniel's space with the confidence of an animal who felt secure and cared for. "She's been good company," Daniel said, hanging up their jackets. "Better conversationalist than most of my former colleagues." The apartment was larger than Anna had expected, with a combined living and dining area that felt spacious despite the standard issue furniture. Daniel had made it his own in small ways, books lined up on built-in shelves, a few photographs on the dresser, the scent of something delicious coming from the kitchen. "Are you cooking?" Anna asked, following the aroma. "Attempting to. I'm not much of a chef, but I can manage basic pasta. Hope that's okay with Sophie." "She loves pasta. You didn't have to go to so much trouble." "It wasn't trouble." Daniel moved around the small kitchen with easy competence, checking on a pot of simmering sauce and setting water to boil for the pasta. Anna watched him work, struck by how domestic this felt, how right it seemed to be here with Sophie playing on the living room floor and dinner preparations underway. "Can I help with anything?" she offered. "You could open the wine if you drink wine. I got some juice boxes for Sophie." Anna accepted a glass of red wine gratefully, needing something to do with her hands. The wine was good, better than anything she typically bought for herself, and she wondered if Daniel had made a special trip to get it. "How was work today?" he asked, stirring the sauce. The question was so normal, so much like something a partner might ask after a long day, that Anna felt her chest tighten with longing. "Good. My students were full of energy, which usually means the weather's about to change." She paused, then added, "One of them asked if I was getting married." Daniel's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. "What did you tell her?" "That I was having a good day." Their eyes met across the small kitchen, and Anna felt the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. This was dangerous territory, this growing intimacy that felt both foreign and familiar. "Mr. Daniel," Sophie called from the living room. "Whiskers wants to show you something." The moment broke, and Daniel went to see what the cat had discovered now. Anna followed, finding Whiskers sitting proudly beside a small pile of items she'd apparently collected: a pen, a hair tie, and what looked like a bottle cap. "She's making you a present," Sophie explained seriously. "Cats do that when they really like someone." Anna watched Daniel crouch down to examine Whiskers' offerings, praising the cat's hunting skills with the same patience he'd shown Sophie throughout their acquaintance. This man, who'd commanded military aircraft and faced down hostile situations, was genuinely delighted by a house cat's gift of random objects. Dinner was easier than Anna had expected. Sophie chattered about school and her friends, asking Daniel endless questions about flying and military life. Daniel answered with engaging stories that managed to convey the excitement of aviation without dwelling on its more dangerous aspects. "Did you ever see any clouds that looked like animals?" Sophie asked around a mouthful of pasta. "All the time. There was one formation over Nevada that looked exactly like a dragon. Took pictures, but they never quite captured what I saw with my own eyes. I want to see dragons in clouds someday." "Maybe you will. The sky's full of surprises if you know how to look. Anna found herself relaxing as the evening progressed, the wine and Daniel's easy conversation combining to ease her anxiety. This felt natural in a way that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. After dinner, Sophie curled up on the couch with Whiskers, both of them drowsy from the warm apartment and good food. Daniel and Anna cleaned up together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising coordination. "This was nice," Anna said as Daniel loaded the dishwasher. "Thank you for having us." "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Anna looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because I can see how carefully you guard yourself and Sophie. I wasn't certain you'd take the risk of letting me get closer." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "I'm still not certain I should." Daniel turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Anna, I know I'm asking you to trust someone you barely know. I know that's not fair given what you've been through. But I also know that what I'm feeling isn't going anywhere, and I don't want to spend the next 6 months wondering what might have been." Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you feeling?" "Like I've been sleepwalking for 2 years, and being around you and Sophie woke me up. Like maybe there's a reason that storm diverted our plane. A reason I was sitting in 15C instead of somewhere else." The intensity in his voice made Anna's knees weak. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this connection between them was as real and lasting as it felt. But fear had been her companion for so long that she didn't know how to set it aside. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of me. Of this. Of wanting something I might not be able to have. Of Sophie getting hurt if you change your mind." Daniel stepped closer, close enough that Anna could smell his aftershave, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Anna, I lost the most important thing in my world 2 years ago. I know what it feels like to love someone completely and then have to figure out how to keep breathing without them. I would never ever do that to Sophie. Or to you." The conviction in his voice broke through her last defenses. Anna felt tears gathering in her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion this man could inspire in her after such a short time. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be part of your lives if you'll have me. Not just for crisis management or borrowed cats, but for all of it. The good days and the terrible ones, the morning rush and the bedtime stories, the parent-teacher conferences and the dance recitals." Anna stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. When was the last time someone had wanted the full reality of her life instead of just the convenient parts? "Sophie's not an easy kid to love," she said, testing him. "She asks a million questions, gets into everything, has nightmares about her father not loving her enough to stay. She's amazing. She's brave and curious and kind, just like her mother. I don't have money for fancy restaurants or weekend getaways. Most nights I'm too tired to be interesting company." "Anna, I don't want fancy restaurants. I want to help Sophie with homework and hear about your students and figure out how to make Whiskers and Mittens get along when Mrs. Chen recovers." The specificity of his vision stunned her. He wasn't offering vague romantic gestures, he was volunteering for the daily reality of family life with all its mundane challenges and small rewards. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Instead of answering with words, Daniel cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper, when Anna melted against him with a small sound of surrender. The kiss tasted like wine and possibility, like the answer to questions Anna hadn't known how to ask. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Anna felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "I'm sure," Daniel said quietly. "The question is whether you're willing to take a chance on us." Anna looked over at the couch where Sophie had fallen asleep with whiskers draped across her lap, both of them peaceful and secure in this borrowed space that already felt like home. "Yes," she said, the word barely audible but weighted with all the hope and fear and desperate longing she'd been carrying. "Yes, I want to take a chance on us." Daniel's smile was radiant, transforming his serious features into something that made Anna's heart race. He kissed her again, gentler this time, sealing the promise they'd just made to each other. "So what happens now?" Anna asked when they came up for air. "Now we figure it out as we go. Together." The word "together" sent warmth flooding through Anna's chest. For 6 years, she'd faced every challenge alone, made every decision in isolation, carried every burden without help. The prospect of true partnership felt almost too good to be true. But as Daniel's arms closed around her and Sophie stirred sleepily on the couch, Anna allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their unexpected detour had led them exactly where they were supposed to be. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, Sophie curled between them, while Whiskers claimed Anna's lap. They talked quietly about practical things, Daniel's timeline for finding permanent housing, Anna's schedule for visiting Mrs. Chen, the logistics of blending their lives without rushing the process. But underneath the practical conversation was a current of deeper connection, the recognition that they'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Anna had opened her heart to the possibility of love again, and Daniel had committed to being worthy of that trust. When it came time to leave, Sophie protested sleepily, not wanting to say goodbye to either Daniel or Whiskers. "When will we see you again?" she asked, echoing her question from the hotel in Nebraska. "Soon," Daniel promised, looking to Anna for confirmation. "Maybe this weekend we could take Whiskers to visit Mrs. Chen in the hospital." Anna nodded, already planning how they could coordinate their schedules. She'd love that. On the subway ride home, Sophie dozed against Anna's shoulder, while Anna stared out the dark windows and tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened. In the space of one evening, she'd gone from guarded single mother to woman in love, from solitary survivor to part of a potential family. The transformation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But as Sophie stirred and mumbled something about making sure Whiskers had enough blankets, Anna knew she'd made the right choice. For the first time in years, she wasn't facing tomorrow alone. The thought should have been frightening. She'd worked so hard to become self-sufficient, to need no one's help or approval. Instead, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. That night, after Sophie was safely tucked into bed, Anna sat on her couch with a cup of tea and let herself imagine what their life might look like with Daniel in it. Sunday mornings that didn't revolve around doing laundry alone. Someone to help with Sophie's math homework when Anna's own skills reached their limit. A partner to share the small victories and everyday challenges that made up the texture of family life. It was a beautiful dream, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Anna allowed herself to believe it might actually come true. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Sophie forgot her hair tie. "I'll bring it this weekend when we visit Mrs. Chen." Anna smiled, recognizing the excuse for what it was, a reason to maintain contact, to weave their lives together in small, practical ways. She typed back, "Thank you for everything." His response came quickly, "Thank you for taking a chance on us." "Sweet dreams, Anna." Anna set her phone aside and closed her eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. Instead, she lay in the darkness thinking about storms that led to unexpected destinations, and the man who'd shown her that sometimes the greatest courage was not in facing the world alone, but in letting someone else help carry the load. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new reasons to doubt and second-guess her decision. But tonight, Anna allowed herself to bask in the unfamiliar warmth of hope, in the knowledge that she was no longer writing her story alone. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain, but no longer solitary, and Anna found that she could hardly wait to see what the next chapter would bring. The weeks that followed blurred together in a dance of careful coordination and growing intimacy. Anna found herself checking her phone constantly for Daniel's messages, each ping of a notification sending a flutter of anticipation through her chest. Their relationship developed in stolen moments, quick phone calls during her lunch break, evening dinners that stretched long past Sophie's bedtime, weekend visits to Mrs. Chen that turned into impromptu adventures around the city. It was during one of these hospital visits that Anna first glimpsed the depth of Daniel's character beyond his quiet strength. Mrs. Chen had been having a difficult day, frustrated by the slow pace of her recovery, and worried about being a burden on everyone around her. "I should have been more careful," the elderly woman said, tears gathering in her eyes as she struggled with the physical therapy exercises. "Now I'm just trouble for everyone." Anna started to offer the usual reassurances, but Daniel leaned forward in his chair, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Chen, may I tell you something? In the Air Force, we had a saying, 'Leave no one behind.' It didn't just apply to combat situations. It meant that when someone in your unit needed help, you helped them. Not because they owed you something, not because you expected something in return, but because that's what family does." Mrs. Chen looked at him with watery eyes. "But I'm not your family." "With respect, ma'am, I think you're wrong about that. You took care of Anna and Sophie when they needed help. Anna's taking care of your cat, because you can't right now. I'm helping because Anna needed someone she could count on. That sounds like family to me, even if we don't all share the same last name." The old woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but Anna could see the comfort Daniel's words had provided. Later, as they walked to the parking garage, Anna found herself studying his profile in the late afternoon sunlight. "That was beautiful what you said to her." Daniel shrugged, but Anna caught the slight flush that crept up his neck. She needed to hear that she wasn't alone. "I know what that feels like." The vulnerability in his admission made Anna's chest tight with affection. They were both learning to be part of something larger than themselves, to trust in connections that went beyond blood relations or legal obligations. Sophie was waiting for them at Anna's apartment, having spent the afternoon with their downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She bounded down the stairs as soon as she heard their voices chattering excitedly about the art project she'd been working on. "I made you something, Mr. Daniel," Sophie announced, thrusting a construction paper creation into his hands. Anna looked over his shoulder at the artwork, a family portrait done in crayon and marker, featuring 3 stick figures and 2 cats standing in front of a house. The tallest figure had dark hair and was labeled Daniel in Sophie's careful printing. The medium figure with yellow hair was Mommy, and the smallest figure also with yellow hair was Me. 2 cats labeled Mittens and Whiskers completed the scene. Anna's breath caught in her throat. In Sophie's mind, they were already a family unit, complete and permanent. The innocence of it was both touching and terrifying. What if Daniel decided this was too much, too fast? What if Sophie's assumptions about their future were premature? But when Anna looked at Daniel's face, she saw only wonder, and something that looked suspiciously like tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. "This is the most beautiful picture anyone's ever given me," he told Sophie seriously. "Can I keep it? Of course I made it special for you. See, we're all together, and we have a big house with a yard for the cats." "I see that. It looks like a perfect house." Anna watched Daniel study the drawing, with the attention most people reserved for museum masterpieces, and something settled deeper into place in her heart. This wasn't a man who would run from commitment, or be frightened by a child's dreams of permanence. This was someone who understood that families were built through intention and care, not just shared DNA. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Anna and Daniel sat on her couch, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing. The apartment felt different with him in it, smaller in some ways, but also more complete. His presence filled empty spaces Anna hadn't even realized existed. "She's been drawing families a lot lately," Anna said, nodding toward Sophie's bedroom where the artwork was now proudly displayed on the dresser. "Her counselor at school says it's normal for kids her age to fantasize about having a traditional family structure." "Is that what you think this is, a fantasy?" Anna looked at him, recognizing the careful neutrality in his voice that masked deeper concerns. "Is that what you think it is?" "Anna, I've been thinking about that picture all evening. About the house with a yard, about having both cats in one place, about Sophie having a bedroom that she never has to worry about losing because someone decides to leave." The intensity in his voice made Anna's heart race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to make that picture real. Not tomorrow, not in some rushed timeline that scares either of us, but eventually. I want to find us a house with a yard where Sophie can play and the cats can chase butterflies. I want to be the man in that drawing officially and permanently." Anna felt tears gathering in her eyes. The specificity of his vision, the way he'd included even the smallest details of Sophie's imagined future, overwhelmed her with gratitude and love. "You're talking about marriage," she said quietly. "Eventually, yes. If that's what you want too." Anna thought about her first marriage to Marcus, rushed into, because she was pregnant, built on infatuation rather than genuine compatibility, doomed by his inability to handle responsibility. This felt completely different. Daniel wasn't offering her a fantasy of romance. He was volunteering for the daily reality of family life with all its challenges and rewards. "I want that too," she whispered. "Someday, when we're both ready." Daniel's smile was radiant in the soft lamplight. He leaned over to kiss her soft and sweet, and Anna felt like she was sealing a promise that would shape the rest of their lives. The conversation that night opened floodgates of planning and dreaming that had been carefully contained until then. Over the following weeks, they began talking about practical things: Daniel's search for permanent housing, Anna's lease renewal, the timeline for introducing more permanence into their relationship. It was during one of these planning sessions that Anna realized how much her own perspective had changed. Where she'd once seen obstacles and potential disasters, she now saw problems with solutions. Daniel's steady presence had given her the confidence to dream bigger than mere survival. "There's something I need to tell you," Daniel said one evening as they walked through Prospect Park with Sophie riding her scooter ahead of them. They'd made it a weekly tradition, these Sunday afternoon outings that gave them time to talk, while Sophie burned off energy. Anna's stomach dropped slightly. In her experience, conversations that began with, "I need to tell you something," rarely ended well. "What is it?" "I got a job offer. A consulting position with a private aviation company. It's good money, benefits, the kind of stability I've been looking for." Anna felt a mix of relief and pride. Daniel had been struggling with his transition from military to civilian life, and she knew how important it was for him to find meaningful work. "That's wonderful. When do you start?" "That's the complicated part. The position is based in Virginia, about 4 hours south of here." Anna stopped walking, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. Sophie, oblivious to the sudden tension, continued scootering toward the playground. "You'd have to move," Anna said, her voice carefully neutral. "The company has offices in New York too, but the main contract is with clients in the DC area. I'd probably need to relocate, at least initially." Anna felt her carefully constructed future crumbling around her. Just when she'd allowed herself to believe in the possibility of lasting happiness, the universe was reminding her that good things were temporary, that she should never count on someone staying. "When would you leave?" she managed to ask. "Anna, look at me." She turned to face him, trying to keep her expression composed despite the panic flooding her system. "I haven't accepted the job," Daniel said. "I wanted to talk to you first, because any decision I make affects all of us now." The fact that he'd consulted her before making a major life decision should have been comforting, but Anna's old fears were too strong. She'd heard Marcus make similar promises about considering her input, only to make unilateral choices when it suited his purposes. "You should take it," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "It's a good opportunity." "Anna, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking what you think about the possibility of making this work long distance, or about the three of us relocating together." The casual way he included Sophie in his calculations made Anna's throat tight with emotion. But the practical part of her mind was already cataloging the impossibilities: her teaching contract, Sophie's school, the life they'd built in New York. "I can't just uproot Sophie from everything she knows," Anna said. "She's finally settled, has friends, a good school. And my job—" "I know. I'm not asking you to make that sacrifice. I'm asking if we can find another solution." Anna wanted to believe they could, but her experience had taught her that long-distance relationships rarely survive the strain of separation. She'd watched too many friends lose connection with partners who were temporarily relocated for work. "Maybe you should take some time to think about it," she said, hating the way she was already pulling back, protecting herself from inevitable disappointment. Daniel studied her face with the same intensity he'd probably once used to read weather patterns before flights. "You're scared," he said. "You think I'm going to choose the job over you. Aren't you?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Sophie's laughter carried across the playground, a reminder of what was at stake in this conversation. "Anna, I spent 20 years putting my career first. It cost me relationships, cost me time with Sarah that I can never get back. I'm not making that mistake again." The conviction in his voice should have reassured her, but Anna had heard similar promises before. "What if the company won't let you work remotely? What if it's Virginia or nothing?" "Then it's nothing. There are other jobs, Anna. There's only one you and Sophie." Anna stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. Men in her experience didn't turn down career opportunities for women they'd known less than 2 months. There had to be a catch, some condition she wasn't seeing. "You'd really do that? You have up a good job for us." In a heartbeat. The sincerity in his voice broke through her defenses. Anna felt tears threatening, overwhelmed by the depth of his commitment to their relationship. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I'm not used to someone putting us first." Daniel pulled her into his arms, right there on the park path, not caring about the other families walking around them. "You're going to have to get used to it," he said against her hair. "Because that's what people do when they love each other. They make sacrifices. They find solutions. They don't run at the first sign of complications." The word love sent shockwaves through Anna's system. They hadn't said it yet, had been dancing around the emotion for weeks without naming it directly. "You love me?" she asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Anna, I've been in love with you since that first night in the hotel hallway when you trusted me enough to tell me about Marcus. I just didn't want to scare you by saying it too soon." Anna felt like her heart might burst with the intensity of her feelings. "I love you too. I've been terrified to admit it, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." Daniel's kiss was fierce, full of promise and relief, and the kind of passion that comes from finally being able to speak truth without reservation. When they broke apart, Anna felt like the world had shifted into sharper focus. "So what do we do about Virginia?" she asked. "We figure it out. Together. Maybe I can negotiate remote work a few days a week, drive down for client meetings. Maybe they have projects in New York I could focus on. We don't have to solve it today." Anna nodded, feeling some of her panic subside. This was what partnership meant, facing problems as a team rather than assuming the worst and planning for abandonment. "Mommy, Mr. Daniel," Sophie's voice carried across the playground. "Come push me on the swings." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the playground, Sophie oblivious to the emotional breakthrough her parents had just experienced. Anna watched Daniel push her daughter on the swings, both of them laughing at some shared joke, and felt a deep sense of rightness settle in her chest. This was her family, messy and unconventional, and still finding its shape but real in ways that transcended legal documents or traditional timelines. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Anna and Daniel lay in her bed talking about the future with a new openness. The love confessions had changed something between them, removed a layer of caution that had been governing their interactions. "I want to meet your parents," Anna said, tracing patterns on Daniel's chest with her finger. "They'd love you. They've been worried about me since Sarah died. Keep asking when I'm going to start living again. I think they'd be relieved to know I found someone who makes me want to build a future." "What about your job situation? Are you really willing to turn down Virginia if they won't let you work remotely?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking through Anna's hair with gentle repetition. "Anna, I need you to understand something. For 2 years after Sarah died, I was just going through the motions. Working, eating, sleeping, but not really living. Being with you and Sophie has reminded me what it feels like to have something worth fighting for. No job is worth losing that." The absolute certainty in his voice made Anna's chest tight with emotion. She'd spent so many years believing that she and Sophie weren't worth someone's best efforts, that they were burdens to be managed rather than treasures to be cherished. "What if we moved to Virginia?" she heard herself say. "Not immediately, but eventually, if Sophie and I liked it there." Daniel went very still beneath her. "You'd consider that?" "I'd consider anything that meant keeping our family together. Maybe change would be good for us. Sophie's young enough to adapt and teaching positions exist everywhere. Anna, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. That's the difference." Daniel rolled over so he could look into her eyes, his expression serious in the dim light from the street lamp outside her window. "Are you sure I don't want you to feel pressured into uprooting your whole life for me?" Anna thought about her mother's final words about being stronger than she knew. Maybe strength wasn't just about surviving alone. Maybe it was also about being brave enough to build something new with someone who proved they were worthy of trust. "I'm sure," she said. "But we do this carefully together. No rushed decisions, no assumptions. We visit Virginia, let Sophie see what it's like. If it feels right for all of us, then we make the move." Daniel's kiss was soft, reverent, full of gratitude and love and promises for the future. "I can't believe you're real," he whispered against her lips. "I can't believe you stayed," Anna whispered back. The next few weeks were filled with phone calls and negotiations as Daniel worked with the Virginia company to structure a position that would work for their family. Anna was amazed by his persistence, the way he advocated for their needs without being demanding or unreasonable. "They agreed to let me work remotely 3 days a week initially," he reported after one particularly long phone conversation. "If the arrangement works out, we can revisit the terms after 6 months." Anna felt a surge of pride at his diplomatic skills, the way he'd found a solution that respected everyone's needs. They planned a weekend trip to Virginia to explore the area and let Sophie experience a different part of the country. Anna was nervous about the visit, worried that the reality wouldn't match the fantasy they'd been building. But as their train pulled into Union Station in Washington, D.C., on a crisp Saturday morning in November, Anna felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about an unknown future instead of fear. "Look at all the buildings." Sophie pressed her face to the window as the train slowed. "They're so tall." Daniel had reserved a hotel room near the company's offices, with plans to spend Saturday exploring the area and Sunday visiting potential neighborhoods. Anna tried to approach the weekend with an open mind, looking for reasons to love this place rather than excuses to reject it. Their first stop was the National Mall, where Sophie's eyes went wide at the sight of the Washington Monument stretching into the blue sky. "Is that where the president lives?" she asked, pointing toward the White House in the distance. "That's his office," Daniel explained. "His house is behind those trees." They spent hours wandering through the Smithsonian Museum, Sophie equally fascinated by dinosaur bones and space shuttles. Anna found herself relaxing as the day progressed, charmed by the city's blend of history and energy. "It feels different from New York," she told Daniel as they sat on a bench eating ice cream, while Sophie chased pigeons nearby. "Different how?" Anna considered the question. "Less frantic, maybe. Like there's more space to breathe." That evening, they drove through several neighborhoods that Daniel's potential colleagues had recommended: tree-lined streets with good schools and family-friendly communities. Anna tried to imagine their life in these places, Sophie riding her bike on sidewalks that weren't crowded with pedestrians, all of them having dinner in houses with actual yards. "What do you think?" Daniel asked as they explored a particularly charming area called Arlington. "I think Sophie would love having a yard," Anna said, watching her daughter examine interesting rocks in someone's garden. "What about you? Could you see yourself being happy here?" Anna looked around at the quiet street, the families walking dogs and pushing strollers, the general sense of suburban peace that was so different from their urban reality. "I could see us being happy here," she said carefully. "But I'd need to find the right school system, make sure Sophie would have good opportunities." "Of course. We wouldn't make any decision until we were sure it was right for all of us." That night, back in their hotel room, with Sophie asleep in the adjoining bed, Anna and Daniel made love with a tenderness that spoke of shared dreams and mutual commitment. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Anna felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of wanting this too much. Of believing that we can actually have the life Sophie drew in that picture." Daniel's arm tightened around her. "Anna, we can have whatever life we're willing to build together. It won't always be easy, but it will be ours." The simple confidence in his voice made Anna's chest tight with love and gratitude. This man who'd seen combat and faced loss and rebuilt his life from scratch believed in their future with unshakable certainty. "Okay," she whispered into the darkness. "Let's do it. Let's take the job and find a house with a yard and see what happens when we stop being scared of being happy." Daniel's response was wordless, but complete: a kiss that tasted of promise and forever. Sunday morning brought a different kind of exploration as they visited open houses and got a feel for the local real estate market. Anna was surprised by how much house they could afford. Compared to New York prices, how realistic it seemed that Sophie could have her own room and a place to play outside. "Look, Mommy." Sophie ran through the backyard of a colonial-style house that had caught all of their attention. "There's a swing set already here." Anna watched her daughter test the swings, imagining summer afternoons and birthday parties in this space. It was so different from their cramped apartment, so full of possibilities for the kind of childhood Anna had always wanted to give Sophie. "The schools in this district are excellent," the realtor was saying to Daniel, "and it's only 20 minutes from your office, even in traffic." Anna found herself mentally arranging furniture in the spacious living room, picturing their books on the built-in shelves, imagining Daniel's reading chair by the fireplace with both cats claiming various parts of it. "What do you think?" Daniel asked quietly as Sophie explored the rest of the yard. "I think it feels like home," Anna said, surprised by the truth of it. "I think maybe we've been living in survival mode for so long that I forgot what it felt like to actually envision a future." That evening on the train back to New York, Sophie fell asleep across their laps, exhausted by the weekend's adventures. Anna and Daniel talked in quiet voices about timelines and logistics, about the practical steps that would transform their Virginia dreams into reality. "I'll give my notice at school after Christmas," Anna decided. "That way Sophie can finish out the year with her friends, and we can take the summer to make the transition." "Are you sure that's asking a lot of you, managing everything while I start the new job?" Anna looked at Daniel's concerned expression and felt a surge of love for this man who worried about asking too much of her, even as she was volunteering to uproot her entire life for their shared future. "Daniel, for 6 years, I've been making all the hard decisions alone. Having someone to share the load, even if they're working in Virginia, while I'm packing up our life in New York, is still better than doing it completely by myself." The gratitude in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too. All of you. The career-focused military officer and the grieving widower and the man who lets borrowed cats take over his favorite chair. I love the whole complicated package." Daniel's smile was soft in the dim light of the train car. "Lucky for me." "Lucky for all of us," Anna corrected, looking down at Sophie's peaceful face. "I think we're all about to get very, very lucky." The train carried them north through the darkness toward home, toward the life they were leaving behind, and the future they were choosing to build together. Anna felt lighter than she had in years, unburdened by the weight of facing tomorrow alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the logistics of moving the adjustment to a new community, the daily work of blending their lives into something permanent, they would face them together. The thought was both thrilling and deeply comforting, a reminder that the greatest adventures were often the ones that led not away from home, but toward a new definition of what home could be. As the familiar skyline of Manhattan appeared in the distance, Anna squeezed Daniel's hand and made a silent promise to the sleeping child in her arms. This time she was choosing someone who would stay, someone who saw their small family as a gift worth any sacrifice. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain, but no longer solitary, and Anna found herself eager to discover what the next chapter of their story would bring. 6 months later, Anna stood in the doorway of what would soon be Sophie's new bedroom, watching her daughter direct Daniel in the precise placement of her bookshelf. The house in Arlington had become theirs 3 weeks ago, but they were still in the delicate dance of making it feel like home. "No, Mr. Daniel, it needs to be by the window so I can read in the morning sun like Grandma Ruth used to," Sophie instructed with the serious authority of a 7-year-old who knew exactly how her world should be arranged. Daniel obediently shifted the small bookshelf another 6 inches toward the window. His patience with Sophie's exacting standards both amusing and deeply touching to Anna. In the months since their Virginia visit, she'd watched him navigate the complex transition from independent adult to family man with a grace that still amazed her. "Better?" he asked Sophie, wiping his hands on his jeans. Sophie studied the placement with the intensity of an interior designer. "Perfect. Now when I read Charlotte's Web, I'll be able to see if any spiders are making webs outside my window." Anna smiled at her daughter's logic, remembering her own childhood fascination, with finding stories everywhere in the natural world. The house was full of these little discoveries, morning light, that painted rainbows on the kitchen wall, a backyard maple tree perfect for climbing a basement that echoed wonderfully when Sophie sang her favorite songs. "Anna, can you come help me with something?" Daniel called from downstairs. She found him in what they'd designated as his home office, standing before a wall where he'd been hanging certificates and photographs from his Air Force career. But it was the newest addition that made her breath catch: Sophie's family portrait from that first evening at his temporary quarters, now professionally framed and given place of honor among his military commendations. "I wanted to make sure the height was right," Daniel said, adjusting the frame slightly. "Sophie's going to want to see it when she comes in here." Anna studied the wall, 20 years of military service reduced to a few framed documents, but somehow Sophie's crayon drawing held equal weight among them. The message was clear: his old life had been important, but this new chapter was precious. "It's perfect," Anna said, stepping into his arms. "Just like everything else you do." Daniel's embrace was warm and familiar now, but it still sent the same flutter of contentment through her chest that she'd felt that first night in the Nebraska hotel. Some things she'd learned only got better with time and trust. "Mrs. Chen called while you were upstairs," Daniel said. "She wanted to know what time we should expect her tomorrow." Anna's stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. Mrs. Chen's recovery had progressed better than anyone had dared hope, and she'd finally been cleared to travel for Sophie's birthday party. It would be the first time their elderly friend had seen the new house, the first time she'd witnessed firsthand the life that had grown from the seeds of kindness she'd planted by watching Anna's cat during that terrible weekend. "Did she sound excited?" Anna asked. "She sounded like a woman who's been missing her extended family. I think she's more excited about this party than Sophie is." The party itself would be small, just Mrs. Chen, Daniel's parents, who were driving down from Pennsylvania, and a few of Sophie's new friends from the neighborhood. But it felt momentous in ways that had nothing to do with the guest list, and everything to do with what it represented: their first major celebration as a complete family unit. "Speaking of the party," Daniel said, "I have something I wanted to discuss with you." Anna looked at him, recognizing the careful tone he used when he was about to broach something important. "What is it?" Daniel took her hand, his thumb tracing over the simple gold band she'd been wearing for the past month. They'd gotten married in a quiet ceremony at the Arlington courthouse with Sophie as their only witness, and Mrs. Chen participating via video call from her rehabilitation facility. It hadn't been the wedding of anyone's dreams, but it had felt perfect in its simplicity, a legal recognition of what had already become true in their hearts. "I was thinking," Daniel said carefully, "that tomorrow might be a good time to make another announcement. About Sophie." Anna's heart rate picked up. They'd been discussing adoption for months, but the legal complexities had seemed daunting. Marcus had officially relinquished his parental rights the previous fall, claiming he wanted a clean slate with his new life in Seattle. Anna had been hurt on Sophie's behalf, but also secretly relieved that there would be no custody complications in their future. "You talked to the lawyer?" Anna asked. "I filed the paperwork last week. If Sophie agrees, and only if she agrees, I'd like to legally adopt her. Make our family official in every way that matters." Anna felt tears gathering in her eyes. She'd known this moment was coming, had been part of the discussions and planning. But hearing Daniel say the words out loud made it real in a way that took her breath away. "Are you sure?" She asked the question, a reflex born of years of being disappointed by men who made promises they couldn't keep. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious and infinitely tender. "Anna, I've been her father in every way that matters for months now. I help with homework and kiss scraped knees and worry about her when she's at school. I love her like she's my own blood, because she is my own heart. The only thing missing is the legal paperwork." The conviction in his voice broke through Anna's last defenses. She thought about Sophie's easy acceptance of Daniel's presence in their lives, the way she'd started calling him Dad without fanfare or formal discussion, as if the title was simply a natural evolution of their relationship. "She's going to be so happy," Anna whispered. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked. Instead of answering with words, Anna kissed him with all the love and gratitude and overwhelming joy that had been building in her chest for months. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, she pressed her forehead to his. "I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life," she said. "Sometimes I wake up in the morning and can't believe this is real, that we get to have this." "It's real," Daniel assured her. "We're real. This family we've built together, it's the most real thing I've ever been part of." That evening, as they went through the familiar routine of dinner and bath time and bedtime stories, Anna found herself studying each moment with heightened awareness. Tomorrow would mark not just Sophie's 8th birthday, but the official beginning of a new chapter in their family's story. "Dad," Sophie's voice came from her new bedroom as Daniel was tucking her in. Anna paused in the hallway, still not entirely used to hearing her daughter use that title, but loving it more each time. "What is it, sweetheart?" Daniel asked. "Do you think Grandma Ruth would like our new house?" Anna's throat tightened at the question. Sophie still talked about her grandmother, regularly weaving memories of Ruth into their daily conversations with the easy acceptance of a child who understood that love doesn't end with death. "I think she would love it," Daniel said. "Especially the way the morning light comes through your bedroom window. She always loved beautiful light." "And she would love you too," Sophie said with absolute certainty, "because you make Mommy smile the way she used to smile when Grandma was here." Anna had to press her hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Daniel's voice when he responded was rough with emotion. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, Sophie. Thank you." "You're welcome. Good night, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." Anna slipped back downstairs before Daniel emerged from Sophie's room, needing a moment to compose herself before facing the depth of emotion she'd surely see in his eyes. She busied herself with party preparations, checking and rechecking the list of tasks that needed to be completed before their guests arrived. Daniel found her in the kitchen 20 minutes later, frosting a homemade chocolate cake with the kind of precision that suggested nervous energy rather than culinary perfectionism. "That cake is going to be the most thoroughly frosted dessert in Virginia history," he observed gently. Anna laughed, recognizing that she was channeling her emotions into party planning. "I just want everything to be perfect. Mrs. Chen hasn't seen us since the hospital. Your parents have never seen Sophie in her natural environment. And tomorrow, we're going to tell everyone that you're officially becoming her father." "Anna." Daniel's hands covered hers, stilling her frantic frosting efforts. "It's going to be perfect because we're all together. That's all that matters." Anna looked at him, this man who'd learned to calm her anxieties with quiet reassurance, who'd become fluent in the language of her fears and learned to translate them into manageable realities. "When did you become so wise about family dynamics?" she asked. "When I realized that the best family isn't the one that looks perfect from the outside. It's the one that feels like home from the inside." The next morning dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for a backyard birthday party. Anna woke to the sound of Sophie chattering excitedly to both cats who had taken up residence in her bedroom and seemed to enjoy her running commentary on daily life. "Mittens, today is my birthday, and Mrs. Chen is coming, and Grandpa and Grandma Cole are coming, and I think Dad might have a surprise for me, because he's been acting funny all week." Anna smiled, impressed by her daughter's observational skills. Sophie had definitely noticed Daniel's increased nervousness as the adoption conversation approached. Daniel was already up, having taken on breakfast duties, while Anna focused on final party preparations. She found him in the kitchen making Sophie's requested birthday breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like flowers. "You're getting good at this domestic thing," Anna observed, stealing a piece of bacon from the plate he'd prepared. "I had good teachers," Daniel replied, flipping a pancake with impressive precision. "Sophie's very specific about how birthday breakfasts should be prepared." "Where did you learn to make flower-shaped pancakes?" Daniel's expression grew soft with memory. "Sarah used to make them for her niece's birthdays. I guess some things stick with you." Anna felt a familiar pang of gratitude toward the woman she'd never met, but who had helped shape the man she now loved. Sarah's influence was visible in so many of Daniel's kindnesses, in his instinctive understanding of how to make ordinary moments special. "I think she'd be happy that you're using her tricks to make Sophie smile," Anna said. Daniel looked at her with surprise and something that might have been relief. They'd talked about Sarah occasionally, but Anna had been careful not to pry into memories that might still be too painful to share. "You don't mind when I mention her?" Anna considered the question seriously. "I mind that she died too young, and that you had to go through that kind of loss. But I don't mind that she's part of the story that led you to us. I think maybe she's part of why you were in seat 15C that night, part of why you knew how to recognize a family worth fighting for." Daniel set down his spatula and pulled Anna into his arms, holding her with the kind of fierce gratitude that spoke of wounds she'd helped heal without even realizing it. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love the way you make room for all the complicated parts of life instead of pretending they don't exist." Their moment was interrupted by Sophie bounding into the kitchen, already dressed in her party outfit, a yellow sundress that brought out the gold highlights in her hair. "Is breakfast ready? Can I have extra chocolate chips? Did anyone call to say they're coming? Are you sure Mrs. Chen remembers how to get here?" Daniel laughed, releasing Anna to focus on their excited birthday girl. "Breakfast is ready. Yes, you can have extra chocolate chips. Everyone confirmed they're coming. And Mrs. Chen has the address programmed into her phone and backup directions written down." Sophie clapped her hands together, bouncing on her toes with pure joy. Anna watched her daughter's unguarded happiness and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This was what she'd been working toward for 8 years, giving Sophie a childhood full of moments like this, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. The first guests to arrive were Daniel's parents, Tom and Linda Cole, who pulled into the driveway exactly on time with a backseat full of wrapped presents and barely contained excitement about seeing their new granddaughter. Anna had been nervous about meeting Daniel's parents, worried they might view her and Sophie as complications in their son's life. But Linda had embraced Anna like a long-lost daughter within minutes of their first meeting, and Tom had won Sophie over by teaching her to play chess during their previous visit. "There's my birthday girl," Linda called out as Sophie ran to greet them. Anna watched Sophie disappear into Linda's embrace and felt a familiar swell of gratitude. After years of being Sophie's only family, it was overwhelming to see how many people now claimed her daughter as their own. "How are you holding up?" Tom asked Anna quietly, as they watched Linda and Sophie examine the contents of several gift bags. "Good. Nervous about Mrs. Chen's visit, excited about the adoption news, generally amazed that this is my life now." Tom smiled, his expression warm with the same steady kindness Anna had come to associate with Daniel. "He's different, you know," Tom said, "since he found you and Sophie. More like the person he was before the military, before everything that happened with Sarah. Thank you for giving him back his smile. Anna felt tears threatening at the unexpected gratitude in Tom's voice. He gave us more than we ever gave him, she said. We were barely surviving before Daniel. Now we're thriving. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Chen's car service. Anna's elderly friend emerged from the vehicle with careful dignity, using a decorative walking stick that Linda had given her as a recovery gift. But her eyes were bright with excitement as she surveyed the house and yard. Anna, Mrs. Chen called out, her voice strong despite her recent ordeal. Come, let me see this beautiful home you've created. The next hour was a blur of house tours and gift opening, and the kind of multi-generational conversation that Anna was still getting used to. Watching Mrs. Chen examine Sophie's artwork on the refrigerator, while Linda helped Tom set up the outdoor speakers Daniel had requested, Anna felt overwhelmed by the richness of their extended family. This is perfect, Sophie announced, surveying the backyard where balloons and streamers had transformed their ordinary space into something magical. Can we have the adoption ceremony now? Anna's breath caught. They'd planned to make the adoption announcement after cake, but Sophie's direct request changed the timeline considerably. Sweetheart, Anna said carefully, what do you know about adoption? Sophie rolled her eyes with the exaggerated patience of a child explaining something obvious to dense adults. I know that Dad wants to make it official that he's my real father, and I know that means I get to have his last name if I want it. And I know that he's been carrying around important papers in his jacket pocket all week. Anna looked at Daniel, who was trying not to laugh at their daughter's investigative skills. She's very observant, he said. So can we do it now? Sophie asked. I want everyone to be here when Dad becomes my official dad. Anna felt tears gathering in her eyes at Sophie's enthusiasm. She looked around at their small gathering. Mrs. Chen sitting in the shade, with both cats claiming her lap, Tom and Linda arranging gifts on the picnic table, Daniel watching them all with an expression of profound contentment. What do you think? She asked Daniel. Instead of answering with words, Daniel retrieved a folder from his jacket pocket and knelt down to Sophie's eye level. Sophie Carter, he said formally, would you like to become Sophie Cole? Sophie's squeal of delight could probably be heard 3 blocks away. She launched herself into Daniel's arms with such enthusiasm that they both nearly toppled over. Yes, yes, can I sign my name? Can I call you Dad in front of everyone? Can we take pictures? You can do all of those things. Daniel laughed. But first we need to make it official. What followed was the most unconventional adoption ceremony Anna had ever imagined. Tom, who was a retired judge, had brought his credentials to make the proceeding legally binding. Linda produced a camera and immediately began documenting everything. Mrs. Chen wept openly as she watched Sophie carefully sign her new name on the legal documents. I hereby pronounce you officially and legally Sophie Cole, Tom announced with judicial gravity that was somewhat undermined by the catch in his voice. Sophie beamed as if she'd just been crowned royalty. Does this mean I get to help Dad pick out Father's Day presents for himself now? The adults burst into laughter at her logic, and Anna felt something click into place in her chest. This was their family, chaotic and loving, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of cake and games, and the kind of relaxed conversation that happens when people who love each other gather to celebrate something wonderful. Anna found herself moving through their home, watching Daniel teach Sophie's neighborhood friends how to throw a proper spiral football pass, while Tom and Linda cleaned up wrapping paper, and Mrs. Chen supervised everything with the satisfied air of someone whose matchmaking efforts had exceeded all expectations. You look happy, dear, Mrs. Chen said when Anna settled beside her on the porch swing. I am happy. Happier than I ever thought I could be. Mrs. Chen patted Anna's hand with arthritic fingers that were still strong enough to convey deep affection. Your mother would be so proud, she said quietly. She always worried about you and Sophie being alone in the world. I think she'd be very pleased to see how thoroughly not alone you are now. Anna felt tears threaten again at the mention of her mother. Ruth would have loved Daniel, would have approved of his patient strength and gentle humor. More than that, she would have been thrilled to see Sophie so confidently loved by a father figure who chose to be there. I think she sent him to us, Anna said, surprised by her own words. That storm that delayed flight, the fact that he was in the seat right next to us. It feels like too many coincidences to be random. Mrs. Chen smiled, her weathered face creasing with satisfaction. I've always believed that love finds a way, she said. Sometimes it just needs a little help from unexpected storms and stubborn cats. As if summoned by the mention of cats, Whiskers appeared and began twining around Mrs. Chen's legs, purring with the contentment of an animal who had found her way home after a long journey. The sun was beginning to set when their guests finally departed, laden with leftover cake and promises to visit again soon. Sophie had fallen asleep on the living room couch, exhausted by the excitement of her birthday and adoption ceremony. Daniel carried her up to bed, while Anna began the satisfying work of cleaning up after a successful party. Leave it, Daniel said when he found her loading the dishwasher. We can finish tomorrow. Anna looked around at the comfortable chaos of their home gift wrapping, scattered on the coffee table balloons, losing their helium and drooping from the ceiling, the lingering scent of chocolate cake, and the kind of happiness that comes from being surrounded by people who matter. I can't believe this is our life now, she said. Daniel pulled her into his arms, both of them swaying slightly with exhaustion and contentment. Believe it, he said. We earned this. All the struggles, all the fears, all the nights you wondered if you were strong enough to give Sophie the life she deserved, it all led here. Anna thought about that night on the airplane, when cruel strangers had made her feel small and ashamed, when she'd been drowning in grief, and convinced she was failing at everything that mattered. If someone had told her then that within a year she'd be married to the quiet man beside her, living in a house with a yard, watching her daughter sign adoption papers with uncontainable joy, she would never have believed it. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream, she admitted. Daniel's response was to kiss her with the kind of passion that had been simmering beneath their domestic contentment all day, a reminder that their love story was far from over. Does that feel like a dream? He asked against her lips. No, Anna breathed. It feels like home. Later that night, as they lay in bed listening to the sounds of their sleeping house, Sophie's soft breathing from down the hall, the cats investigating some midnight mystery in the kitchen, the settling creaks of a home full of love, Anna reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she'd been a woman defined by loss and struggle, convinced that her role in life was to endure rather than to flourish. Now she was someone's wife, someone's mother, part of a family that had chosen each other across the miles and obstacles that might have kept them apart. Daniel, she whispered into the darkness. Thank you. For what? Anna considered the question. For defending her on an airplane, for taking care of Mrs. Chen's cat, for choosing their family over career advancement, for loving Sophie like his own daughter from the very beginning, for showing Anna that she was worth fighting for. For staying, she said finally, for being the kind of man who stays. Daniel's arm tightened around her, and Anna could feel him smile against her hair. "Anna," he said quietly, "there's nowhere else I'd rather be." Outside their bedroom window, a gentle rain began to fall, the kind of soft summer shower that would nourish the flowers they'd planted together and fill Sophie's rain gauge to overflowing by morning. Anna listened to the peaceful sound and felt a deep sense of completion settle in her chest. This was what happiness felt like, not the frantic excitement of new love, but the steady contentment of choosing each other every day, of building something lasting from the foundation of trust and shared commitment. This was what her mother had meant when she said Anna was stronger than she knew. Strength wasn't just about surviving alone. It was about having the courage to let someone love you, to risk your heart on the possibility of forever. Thunder rumbled gently in the distance, but Anna felt no anxiety about the approaching storm. Their house was solid. Their family was safe, and tomorrow would bring new adventures and small joys, and the countless ordinary moments that make up a life well lived. As sleep finally claimed her, Anna's last conscious thought was a prayer of gratitude for delayed flights and unexpected storms, for kind strangers who become family, for second chances and new beginnings, and for the quiet man beside her who had kept every promise he'd ever made. In the morning, they would wake up to Sophie's excited chatter about her new last name and the rain gauge that had indeed overflowed during the night. There would be breakfast to make and thank you notes to write and the million small tasks that make up family life. But there would also be laughter and love and the deep satisfaction of knowing that they'd found their way home to each other exactly as they were meant to be. The storm had passed, leaving behind clearer skies and the promise of beautiful days ahead. And in a house in Arlington, Virginia, a family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that some love stories begin with turbulence but end with the sweetest kind of peace, the kind that comes from finally, truly being where you belong.